Good morning, Mr. Administrator. We welcome you to the hearing today on the fiscal year 2013 budget request of the National Aeronautical and Space Administration. Our witness is NASA Administrator Charles Bolden. We want to thank you again for being here. NASA's budget request for fiscal year 2013 totals $17.8 billion and is essentially flat from fiscal year 2012. That relatively flat total, however, masks a number of significant reallocations of funding within the agency. If we look at the substance of these funding shifts as an expression of your programmatic priorities, it would appear that you are placing most emphasis on commercial crew, space technology, and the James Webb Space Telescope, while de-emphasizing your work in planetary science, aeronautics, exploration, and education. Allocating scarce resources in a time of fiscal constraint is a complicated and subjective task, which is why I requested in last year's bill an outside look at the balance between NASA's missions and the feasibility of its goals. We don't have the results of that review to inform our discussion today, but I'm sure that other members already have thoughts about your proposal for where we should be focusing on our investments. In addition to discussing budgetary priorities, I'd also like to use this hearing as an opportunity to check in with you on some important policy issues, including the question of interaction or cooperation between NASA and China. The administration is in favor of closer ties in the areas of space science and exploration. And as you know, I strongly disagree. China, an economic competitor who has been proven to steal from us, doesn't need or deserve our help to improve their own capabilities, and I hope the administration comes to realize this soon. We'll ask you to give a summary of your written testimony, then you'll proceed with questions, and before that I'd like to recommend Mr. Fattah for any opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me welcome the Administrator of NASA again to our committee. I look forward to your testimony, and I think that you have provided since your appointment in 2009, extraordinary leadership for NASA over some very challenging times as the recasting of a mission into deep space under President Obama's leadership in the advent of commercial crew, along with the reality of thinking about how we deal with the International Space Station and the changes there. So I think that the chairman is correct that obviously within the budget framework of the $17 billion, you have to deal with a number of differing priorities. And I know that the administration has a set of goals that you are trying to accomplish. And obviously we want to see how the appropriations process fits in and where there may be a shared consensus about the direction of space exploration. It is critically important, however, that we understand your priorities and your needs as you go forward, and I welcome you and your testimony today, and I thank the Chairman for holding this very important hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Fattah. Mr. Administrator, you can proceed.
I want to make sure it's on. Okay. Chairman Wolf, Ranking Member Fattah, today is my privilege to discuss the President's FY 2013 budget request for NASA. All of us at NASA are very grateful to the Congress and to this subcommittee for the strong level of support we continue to receive. Our requested budget, as you've mentioned, Mr. Chairman, is $17.7 billion, which will enable NASA to continue to execute the bipartisan space exploration plan agreed to by the President and the Congress in 2010. Despite the constrained fiscal environment facing the nation, this request supports an ambitious civil space program that puts us on a path to achieving a truly exciting set of goals: to send humans to an asteroid and ultimately to Mars, and to broaden human activity in low Earth orbit. International Space Station assembly is now complete, allowing us to focus on full utilization of the station's research capabilities. NASA is operating a fleet of spacecraft to investigate Earth, the solar system, and the universe. All of this is critical to ensure America's continued leadership in space exploration, as well as our stewardship of Earth. The fiscal year 2013 request supports the implementation of key priorities for NASA agreed upon by the President and congressional leadership. First, American astronauts continue to live and work in space aboard the International Space Station, conducting research to benefit life here on Earth and prepare us for deep space human exploration. NASA is committed to making this national resource available to the broader scientific and commercial research communities. We are also committed to ensuring that American companies launching from U.S. soil transport our astronauts and their cargo to the space station. This year, we will see the first commercial cargo flights to the ISS. And with congressional approval of the funding request, we are on track to have American companies transporting our astronauts to station by 2017. Second, NASA is on track to develop a flexible deep space launch system that will ultimately be the most capable in history. The Space Launch System, or SLS, heavy-lift rocket, and the multi-purpose crew vehicle Orion will carry American astronauts beyond low Earth orbit and into deep space within the next decade. We are pushing forward with contracting and design efforts to advance this critical next-generation space exploration system. Our FY 2013 budget request supports our plans for an uncrewed SLS flight in 2017 and a crewed test mission by 2021. A robust technology development program will be key to the success of our synergized robotic and human exploration. Third, we propose to continue progress toward the launch of the world's most advanced telescope in 2018. The James Webb Space Telescope will operate deep in space to orbit the Sun and look out into space from its vantage point nearly 1 million miles from Earth. Over the past year, NASA has made important adjustments to JWST management and put the project on a sound financial footing. NASA is confident that the 2013 request supports a 2018 launch of JWST. NASA's budget request supports a portfolio of innovative science missions, resulting in a stream of data from orbits around the Sun, Mercury, the Moon, the asteroid Vesta, Mars, and Saturn. We now have missions on the way to Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars. 16 Earth science missions currently in orbit study Earth as an integrated system. The Hubble, Spitzer, Chandra, and Fermi space telescopes continue to make groundbreaking discoveries on an almost daily basis. Last year, the Messenger spacecraft entered orbit around Mercury. The Ebb and Flow satellites began mapping the gravity field of the Moon, and Juno, launched last August, is on its way to Jupiter. However, tough choices had to be made, so we will not be moving forward with the planned 2016 and 2018 ExoMars missions we have been planning with the European Space Agency. Instead, NASA is developing a new integrated strategy for a sequence of strategically selected missions that increase scientific knowledge, advance key technologies, and inform and enable human exploration goals. Our plan, including the framework for a mission to take advantage of the 2018-2020 launch opportunity, is targeted for completion, hopefully in time to support the FY 2013 appropriations process. The FY 2013 request supports this approach, and it will be informed by extensive coordination with the science community and our international partners and, of course, this Congress. The FY 2013 budget request continues to support robust Mars exploration, including 2 spacecraft currently orbiting Mars, the Opportunity rover on the surface, a multi-year exploration of Mars by the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity, and the planned 2013 MAVEN mission to explore the Mars upper atmosphere. The FY 2013 budget request supports continued advances in new aviation, science, and space technologies, absolutely essential to enable NASA to achieve its ambitious goals. At the same time, NASA technology research seeds innovation, supports economic vitality, and helps to create new jobs and expand opportunities for a skilled workforce. With the 2013 request, NASA will conduct aeronautics research to enable realization of the nation's next-generation air transportation system, or NextGen, and the safer, more fuel-efficient, quieter, and environmentally responsible aircraft that will operate with NextGen. To inspire the next generation of scientists and explorers and to foster the development of the U.S. workforce, NASA's education programs will focus on demonstrable results and capitalize on the agency's ability to engage students and educators. To help today's young people envision their future in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is our goal. NASA is grateful for the American people and you, their representatives, here on this subcommittee for your continued support to these difficult and challenging times. Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I understand that the budget pressures require you to make cuts to your science programs, but I don't understand why those cuts are overwhelmingly in planetary science. Is planetary science the lowest priority within the Directorate? Are there no other activities within Earth science, astrophysics, or heliophysics that could have been reduced to lessen the impact on planetary science?
Mr. Chairman, when we took a look at the portfolio, the area that seemed to be actually in the best shape was our Mars exploration, contrary to popular belief. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we have a rover that's currently operating, continuing to provide data, 2 orbiting satellites that continue to pump data back to us on Mars and help us frame the strategic selection of future missions that will be affordable. We have the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity that's en route to Mars, scheduled to land on the 5th of August. It will be the largest, most advanced rover to ever be put on any other planet, and it will begin the return of information that dwarfs anything that we've ever received before. It will actually have a drill that will be coring and getting data from the Mars surface. We'll have high-definition 3D cameras, color cameras that will be bringing back images. And then we have MAVEN, which is going to look at Mars's upper atmosphere, which is critical to our understanding of the atmosphere as we continue to try to send larger and larger vehicles to the planet, such as a human mission.
The Planetary Science Decadal Survey says that any future Mars activity must contribute to the goal of sample return, which is the only way to make further fundamental advances in Mars science. Can your smaller, refocused mission contribute in a meaningful way to sample return? And if not, how will it be consistent with the Decadal Survey findings?
Mr. Chairman, our belief is the smaller, focused missions will help us to better determine the landing site that you want for a sample return. Right now, MSL is going to land in the crater that was chosen because we think it is the most likely place where we'll find water. Most of my planetary scientists tell us when we're talking about Mars, we want to follow the water. So this will be our first effort to go to a place that we absolutely know, or we are very confident, will get the best chance of finding out if there was ever life there or if there is life on Mars. So we actually believe that by bringing about a consistent pattern of less expensive, more focused flights, will be better prepared to set up a Mars sample return. My position has been and continues to be that while we don't have the resources for a sample return mission now, nor have we had them in any of the budgets that I've submitted, everything that we do will not preclude a future Mars sample return mission when the resources are available.
The James Webb. Last year, we had to cut $156 million out of NASA's science and management budgets to keep James Webb on track for 2018 launch date. This year, NASA has proposed an additional $99 million in science cuts to keep pace with the Webb replan. Now that we've seen 2 years' worth of Webb impact on the results of your science portfolio, do you still believe that replanning and continuing the program was the right decision?
Yes, sir, I do, Mr. Chairman. I absolutely do. James Webb Hubble Space Telescope changed our entire outlook on the universe. It has provided us data. It helps us to rewrite textbooks every day. And James Webb will dwarf that. We expect that the return from the James Webb Space Telescope will be anywhere from 50 to 100 times as good as the Hubble Space Telescope. So as not only a national initiative, but as an international mission, it is critical for our further understanding of the universe, and I think the investment is well worth the time. I will comment that we could have taken cuts from the science budget and other parts of NASA's budget to bring James Webb to the capability of flying, say, in 2014, but that did not seem prudent. The prudent thing to do seemed to take the hit on the launch date, move it out to 2018 so that we would not decimate other parts of the NASA budget. So I think we've maintained a balanced portfolio. We still plan to accomplish the scientific objectives that were laid out in the budget that I submitted when I first became NASA Administrator in 2011. Time frames have stretched out in some cases, but I think scientifically I don't think we're going to miss any of the objectives, either from the Decadal Survey. We were never, so I need to correct the record on one thing. We never had a Mars sample return mission within our budget. So people think that by stepping away from ExoMars, we are stepping away from our Mars sample return. There was no Mars sample return mission in the missions, the 2 missions being planned for ExoMars. The 2018 mission was a mission that would have a European drill that would core even deeper than MSL is going to do. MSL goes inches. The European drill, hopefully, will be able to go 2 meters into the surface. So it will give us much better information. The plan was that material would then be cached. It would be put into a storage container of some type. and then we would have to go off and determine what subsequent missions would enable us to either go to the surface and pick it up or put it in orbit and fly a mission, for example, the first human mission, to orbit Mars to go and pick that sample up and bring it back. So I think people misunderstand what ExoMars was. There was no Mars sample return mission in ExoMars. NASA, although that is a prime objective of the decadal survey, I think everyone on the decadal survey study team understood we had no sample return mission on the books. We can't afford it right now.
But was that accurate that the Planetary Science Decadal Survey says that any future Mars activity must contribute to the goal?
That is correct. And what I'm saying is that the missions that we are trying to plan now in our restructured Mars robotic program will in fact contribute to our ability to plan and execute a future Mars sample return mission. It is still to be determined. I am one who believes we do need samples back before we send humans. That is not universally accepted. This committee should understand. There are some, Mr. Zubrin, for example, with the Mars Society, who will tell you he vehemently disagrees. We know enough about Mars that we could send humans today is the belief of some. I am not one who shares that belief, but I'm not smart enough to know. So our intent is to mount an effort to fly a future sample return mission so we will know what's on the planet before we send humans.
I'll continue with James Webb. The original cost of James Webb was going to be 1.5. Is that correct, billion?
Mr. Chairman, if I remember correctly, and it was long before my time here, the original cost of James Webb was billed to be much less, and it was a figment of people's imagination.
Can we agree on that figure roughly?
Yes, sir. I think it was at one time $800 million when it was first envisioned, and it was a figment of people's imagination. But no,
that's the way it was sold.
Yes, sir. That's the way it was sold.
Okay. So the fiscal year 2012 CGS bill included provision capping Webb formulation and development cost at $8 billion and requiring.
Yes, sir.
I think that's the important word. NASA to get the program reauthorized if costs increase any further.
Yes, sir.
NASA has proposed, though, to delete the cost control language in the fiscal year 2013 request. Should this be seen as a sign that OMB took control of this budget, or that you don't intend to abide by the cap and reauthorization provision?
Chairman Wolf, I fully intend to comply by the cap, but
So
there is no intent.
So then this is not necessary, what is being requested with regard to deleting the cost control language.
Chairman, I will have to take for the record the response to that question, because I don't recall the rationale that we were giving for deleting the cost control language, if that is in fact what we did. All I can tell you now is my intent is to abide by the cap.
Oh, okay, so we should ignore that request then.
Chairman, I said I will get you an answer on that. I should know, but I don't know the rationale for the request to delete the cap, and I will get that information and provide it to you.
Okay. One last question in that area, and I'll go to Mr. Fatah. It is NASA's policy that all projects budget to include a budget to a 70% joint cost and schedule level estimate. The budget request, however, shows that the Webb cost estimate has a joint confidence level of only 66%. Why is your highest stakes, most complex science mission budgeted below the agency's estimation standard? Should we be concerned that the Webb budget or schedule are not sufficiently robust?
Chairman, the schedule and the replan we feel is very robust, and in fact we found recently that, as you point out, that the JCL level was 66.6% or something, less than 70%.
Does that trouble you that it falls below the 70%?
No, sir. The confidence in our ability
curve kind of.
Well, in this case, it's this is out of my league, but if you look at the curve, when we look at the confidence of our ability to do this program, when I was given we could spend this much or this much, the curve goes at what they call asymptotic. It just turns straight up. So to put this amount of money on it or that amount of money on it does not change the confidence that we can execute in 2018 significantly, that I wanted to do that. And that was the reason that we chose the additional funds that we did request instead of a lot more. JCLs are great. They are new, relatively new to us. We have several missions that demonstrate to us that they are the way to go. Juno, Grail, several other missions that have come since we decided to use the JCL process. James Webb, unfortunately, was pretty much sealed in concrete before we started using JCL. So we have tried to apply JCL to James Webb, but it gives us confidence that what we did prior to JCL's was good, and we have a good replan.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Fatah.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. And let me, why don't we turn a little bit to the administration's priority on commercial crew. There's been a lot of news lately in terms of where we are in commercial crew. Why don't you summarize before I ask a few questions about how you see the progress in relationship to this exciting effort to engage American enterprise in helping to carry on low Earth orbit interactions with the space station on a routine basis and the like.
Congressman Fatah, I feel very good about where we are. In spite of the low amount of funding in this fiscal year's budget, we still have what I would call a very good stable of potential proposers for the commercial crew system that we hope to have in place by 2017. We know, because they have been active with us through Space Act agreements, that we have no less than 7, but we anticipate that there will be many more than that who will actually ask for an opportunity to be considered for funds from the Space Act agreement that we choose to use to develop the system to take humans to space. So I'm very confident in what we have going right now. We will see, if I may add, while it is different, we will see this spring and summer the demonstration of private industry's capability of doing what NASA used to do. That's taking cargo to the International Space Station. And as I have testified in previous hearings, that's a big deal. That's an incredibly big deal. When we have two private companies, one I think is publicly traded, the other is not. So one is personal investment, the other is corporate investment. When we see them successfully put a capsule into space, rendezvous, and be berthed to the International Space Station and become a part of the International Space Station, that is a huge deal for the United States of America.
Well, obviously, the leadership to move this forward when there was so many doubters, but you're referring to Falcon 9 and the efforts that are underway by SpaceX and some of the other companies. As we move forward, the administration's request for commercial crew is a lot more significant this year, at least based on enacted numbers from last year.
Congressman,
could you explain where
yes, sir,
where these dollars would fall in play?
Congressman, and I will just basically, if the committee will think back to the Augustine report, at that time, the amount that was deemed necessary for a viable commercial space program, I want to say, was $6 billion. And when I started asking questions of industry themselves and others about what would it take for a company to mount a successful effort to take humans to low Earth orbit, the answer that I got was about $2.5 billion per company of NASA investment. That's not total cost. That's NASA investment. And I still believe that number to be in the ballpark. Our original request was significantly more than the request that we submitted in this year's budget of $830 million. It was $1.2, $1.5 billion, because we felt that was what was necessary. And as we briefed previous hearings, if we got less than that, it would stretch the time out. We now find ourselves, unfortunately, with the gap between shuttle and an American capability to send humans to orbit widening because we have less money. The ability to close the gap is directly proportional, well, not directly proportional. It is proportional in some respect to the amount of money that the nation puts forth for that effort. So less money, more time.
Let me shift gears to the astrophysics to go into some of the issues that the chairman was focused on in terms of planetary science. If you could just give us an overview on the astrophysics request. It's for $657 million or so, which includes a number of the missions that are ongoing. If you could give the committee an overview of what you're doing there and what you intend to do.
Yeah. Well, Congressman Fatah, as I mentioned in my statement, we have a number of telescopes currently on orbit, currently operating, to include Chandra, Hubble, and others, If you look at Kepler, the planet finder, we have now discovered that where we thought there were hundreds of planets, there are now millions of other planets in our solar system, in our universe, and in those families of planets, there are some that potentially are Earth-size, Earth-like, and could actually harbor life. So the excitement from our astrophysics missions has exploded, and a lot of that has been due to the accomplishments of less well-known missions like Kepler, Sophia, which is flying out of Dryden and Ames now. It's a 747 with an airborne telescope. Sophia is now into its science phase, and the returns on information from Sophia is in some ways mind-boggling. The other part about Sophia that I think is incredible is when we talk about education is not just the money that we put onto university campuses or into high schools and junior high schools and elementary schools. It's what we call indirect education. We take teachers on the Sophia spacecraft, and we allow them to look at the data that's being gathered by an airborne telescope. They couldn't do that before. And that doesn't come out of the education budget. That comes in the Sophia budget in their educational outreach program. So as we talk about education, there are a lot more ways to educate the public than by putting direct money on it. Sometimes we find that direct money doesn't have the result you want, and that is one of my concerns about education, that we have metrics that demonstrate, as I mentioned in my opening statement, demonstrable results in our education programs. When I became the NASA Administrator, I can tell you I don't think we had the ability to show anybody demonstrable results on what we were getting for our dollar. And I think we're getting to the point now that we can do that.
Two last questions. One on aeronautics. The Boeing's Dreamliner. We see a lot of advances in aviation generally. A lot of this is based in NASA-related technology and research. And I just want to give you an opportunity to crow about it. The fact that, because a lot of times when the public is flying, and we have the safest system of air travel anywhere in the world, I don't think they have a benefit of knowing that a lot of this is directly related to the research that you and your team at NASA has done. So if you want to comment on that.
I do.
And then I have a actual more challenging question about the fact that the chairman and our counterparts in the Senate, at the end of the day, we're going to have to wrestle with some pretty tough decisions between the multi-purpose crew, the web, planetary science issues, and so on. And we've got your testimony and we got the administration's request, but to some degree here, we're not going to be able to fit all of these priorities within this what might be the available dollars. So if you want to close out on that, that would be fine.
Congressman, I would love to, and I'd love to talk all day. You picked the plane. I didn't, and Boeing may even have some disagreement with my statement. It's a NASA airplane. When you look at the technology in the Boeing 757, and my chest was sticking out when I visited the Boeing Everett plant about a month ago and had the opportunity to get aboard the airplane and look at the controls and displays. You see, and they will tell you, as you approach the airplane from the outside, it's largely a composite structure that's developed from NASA research. Critical wing. You look at the engine nacelles, the back end of the engine, you see it looks kind of funny because it looks like shark's teeth. We call them chevron nozzles. It's something that sat on the shelf at the Glenn Research Center in Ohio for probably 10 years until General Electric and other engine manufacturers came and picked it up. It has significantly decreased the noise level from the Boeing 787. I was told by the test folk at Boeing that they are restricted in running engine tests to 11 o'clock at night, except with the Boeing 787. The chevron nozzles have made the engine so quiet that the community doesn't even know they're running engine tests. That's NASA technology. And so we have done things with NASA aeronautics research that have continued to make air travel safer, more efficient. We anticipate that, and this is in talking with industry, airline industry, with United, Southwest, other airlines who have flown some of the tests on our new air traffic management system for routing. potentially $300 million in fuel savings just by using the new air traffic management systems. Constant climb, constant descent, where you don't have to level off all the time. Those are things that NASA does in our aeronautics program. For those of you who are fans of the military, as I am, the Marine Corps flies an incredible aircraft called the Osprey, the MV-22. Went through some rocky times, but that originated with the XV-15, which was a NASA Bell.
Well, it's made in Philadelphia.
It's made in Philadelphia. Parts of it are made in
Parts
Philadelphia.
of it, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Very much. I know your son is serving in the Marines, but talk to us about these budget challenges.
Congressman,
as we think about the big ticket items for NASA.
These are very difficult fiscal times. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that. Because of that, the President and the leadership of the Congress back in late 2010 came to a decision that we were going to establish 3 priorities for the agency. That doesn't say we're not going to do other things, but we're going to really promise that we will focus on these 3 priorities. And those 3 priorities were a heavy lift launch vehicle and multi-purpose crew vehicle for exploration, underpinned, however, by a NASA priority for technology development. We cannot do exploration without enhancing our technology development. The second priority was enhanced utilization and expansion of utilization of the International Space Station as an incredible national laboratory. Critical for the success of that, however, is another NASA priority, which is commercial crew and cargo. And without having an American capability, we will continue to pay the Russians minimum of $450 million a year for seats on Soyuz to get to the International Space Station. And I want to reduce that requirement as quickly as I can. And the third priority in the area of science was the James Webb Space Telescope, which is the most advanced, the most critical scientific instrument for the world, not just the nation, in development today that will expand our understanding of the universe many fold. So those are the 3 top priorities. We tried to fully fund all of those, and then the remaining funds we tried to balance across our portfolio so that we could take the taxpayers' money and spend it wisely. And I don't think we have lost the effectiveness of anything that we had planned in prior years. People keep talking about efficiencies. Well, if you don't gain from efficiencies, which you have to do when you have less money, then it's kind of hopeless. And I think we are gaining efficiencies in the way that we operate, the way we manage programs. James Webb is a great example. We've met every milestone in the last year and a half on our replanned James Webb Space Telescope effort. And some of it is efficiencies, some of it is discipline, some of it is just deciding that we're going to take a different course of action than we took before. We're trying to do the same thing with the robotic Mars program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bolden, thank you for being here. It's great to have you back to our committee. And General Bolden, we thank you for all your hard work with NASA. I'd like to just follow up a little bit on Congressman Vital's questioning on the aeronautics research. And I was pleased to see in your testimony that NASA is continuing to work with the Department of Defense to maximize efficiencies, current assets, and investments, and increases partnerships to accomplish common goals. And one of the emerging industries that I think holds great promise for both our national defense and also in our state in Ohio is the unmanned aerial systems. And you brought that up in your testimony. You discussed NASA's work with NextGen and the Future Aviation of America, as well as the administration's request for $104 million for the Integrated Systems Research Program within the aeronautics research budget. And again, I was very pleased that NASA is working to integrate UASs into the National Air System. Can you go into a little more detail as far as NASA's work with the UAS systems, the industry, technology, as well as the work, the partnership you're doing with the Department of Defense?
We are very closely tied to the FAA and the Department of Defense in trying to come up with the software and traffic management systems that will facilitate the integration of unmanned aerial systems into the National Air Transportation System. That is easier said than done. Most pilots don't like having unmanned aerial vehicles flying around them, and so part of it is education. But as late as yesterday afternoon, in trying to give Secretary Donnelly, the Secretary of the Air Force, a heads up on what I was going to talk about today in this hearing, he and I agreed that we should, in the next few weeks, have a joint NASA-DOD meeting on unmanned aerial systems and the efforts underway to improve the technology, to integrate them. If you go to the Dryden Flight Research Center right now, we have an experiment. It's a test that we're developing in conjunction with Northrop Grumman, the producer of the big UAV. And I apologize for having a brain poo and forgetting the name, but we're actually doing. I'll figure. It'll come to me. But it's used right now for multiple purposes. We use it for. We have developed the capability of putting scientific instruments on it. We do studies at both poles now that we could not do before because we have systems that enable it to fly up in the polar regions where navigation is difficult. We're now getting ready to do an in-flight refueling test where we use one UAV to refuel the other one. And so these are some of the things that we're doing that will advance the integration of UAVs into the National Air Transportation System.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I know there's been several agencies. And I appreciate the fact that you're working with Secretary Donnelly on this, and also the FAA, because clearly they are in the middle of all this and have some tough decisions to make. From a
Global Hawk, by the way.
Global Hawk. Okay, you got
it's age.
But you know, one of the concerns that's been brought to my, and one of the challenges that I've had in this area is that we've had several agencies working to advance the unmanned technologies, but there doesn't appear to be a comprehensive administrative-wide strategy for moving the industry forward. And I think this is especially true when it comes to issues of airspace and integration of the UAS systems, whether you want to call it UAVs or RPAs. You know, for example, many agencies are supporting research on various UAS technologies, but the airspace and regulation standards need to deploy the technology doesn't seem to be ready, or doesn't seem to be a comprehensive plan to move that forward from this administration. Is that one of the hurdles that you're facing, or that are you working together to try to overcome that, to try to put together a comprehensive plan?
Congressman Oster, I think there is a comprehensive plan on the part of the administration to try to move it forward. When I talk about collaboration among the FAA, DOD, and NASA in integration of UASs into the National Airspace System, the Department of Homeland Security also gets involved in that. So we have executive committees that are responsible for trying to develop a comprehensive policy for UAS use. What Secretary Donnelly and I were talking about is a senior level meeting that we need to have to make sure that the administration's policy promotes exactly what you're talking about.
I'd like to see that comprehensive plan,
okay,
if there is a plan, because that'd be very helpful as we look at this in Ohio. Let me go back, and I know you knew I was going to ask you this question, because with the shuttles and that whole process, we're still trying to understand that. Questions still get raised back home, and there's still frustrations back home, and I know you had a very difficult decision. And let me start with, I'm sure you're aware of the report language that was put in the conference report that came out of this committee as far as NASA being directed to submit quarterly reports to the committee on the status of its disposition of the 4 space shuttle orbiters. And help me understand what's going on in New York with the Intrepid and that situation, because as I read about what's going on, as I get information about what's going on, you know, it raises concerns on our end that we happen to have a facility that was ready to go, and now we're seeing what's going on in New York. So I want to better understand that situation, and whether you are aware of, you know, that they did not have a site that was ready to house the shuttle, and that this would be have to be pushed off, you know, to 2014.
Congressman, a couple of things. We do.
This in a report.
We are required to submit a report to you, which the latest one we submitted was January of this year. It is a regular report on the status of. In fact, it's called the quarterly report regarding status of space shuttle orbiter distribution, and we have been delivering that. And I think I have to check with the committee, but I think we have reached an agreement that the submissions have been sufficient, and we may be relieved of the responsibility to do that, but I don't know yet. That was the last conversation I had. At the time that I made the decision on where the orbiters were going to go, there were, to my knowledge, there was only one facility in the country that had completed a structure specifically to house an orbiter, And unfortunately, that facility did not get an orbiter. So there was no facility in Ohio, no facility in New York, no facility in California, no facility in Texas, no facility anywhere ready to put the orbiter on display, not even at the Kennedy Space Center. Every one of the locations that received an orbiter now has a plan that has been reviewed by NASA, an engineering plan, funding plan, and everything in place that has passed the muster for us, and we're confident that they're going to be able to do it. I think the middle of next month, we will make delivery of Discovery to the National Air and Space Museum. That will begin the consecutive movement of orbiters. When we deliver Discovery to the National Air and Space Museum, we will put Enterprise on top of the 747 and transport it to JFK, where New York's plan is to take it by barge across the river. It will be temporarily displayed on board the Intrepid, while the final facility across the street is prepared for it. The facility at the Kennedy Space Center, groundbreaking took place about a month ago, and that is expected to be ready, I think, in 2013, 2014. And then the California Science Center already has their facility underway, and they have an elaborate plan for transporting Endeavour from LAX through the streets of Los Angeles with a parade, and they have quite extensive things that they have to do to get it there. But every place has a plan in place and a funding plan, and we've received all monies that were due in transfer for the orbiters.
The concern that we have, and I appreciate that, Administrator, but the concern we have, not just in Ohio, but throughout the Midwest, and I've also, I know, submitted a letter with my colleague, Congressman Olson from Texas, on how all this criteria, what was known, what wasn't known prior to the choice, the criteria. I mean, I'm looking at a criteria sheet that came back to us on the transportation risk criteria that turns out it was a mistake on NASA's part when they went through this whole criteria stuff, a cut and paste mistake, where they put the wrong number in for example, the National Museum of the United States Air Force, which lowered our score. That's coming from the Inspector General's report, that then when you put that in, we had an equal score with two of the recipients of this. And that raises concerns as to, on my end, as to how this choice was made, who was making the decision, what criteria was used. But when you have this mistake as a result of cut and paste error during the finalization of the chart, and we don't find out till 4 months later from the Inspector General that, yes, there was a mistake, and by the way, you were rated as high as, if the right number was in here, as two of the sites that received a shuttle. That raises concerns on my part as to, the integrity and also, how accurate this criteria choice was.
Congressman,
and it's not just Ohio. These are other areas.
I won't disagree or challenge anything you say, but I'll ask my staff to come over and brief you, because
I think you'll here if you'd like for me to.
I know what you're talking about, and I think what you'll find when the staff comes over and brief you is that there were significant shortcomings on the proposal from the National Air Museum of the Air Force, not the least of which was funding. I will have the staff come over and we can brief in detail and discuss it with you. What I asked to be quite honest, I asked each of the facilities to brief their congressional delegations first, so that they would be able to share with you what they thought their shortcomings were. They could tell you, because I did not want to, and I do not want to get in a public debate about the shortcomings of any of the places that were not selected to receive an orbiter. But the four locations, well, the three locations, because I'm not counting the National Air and Space Museum, that is funded by the government, by NASA. But the other locations, they have provided funds. They had funds either promised or on hand. They provided designs for facilities to display, and they were shown to be, in some cases, objectively, but in some cases subjectively superior to the ones that did not get them. But I'll have my staff come in.
And my question is more on in the broader sense, the process that was used, the reports. If you said you submitted one in January, I'm anxious to take a look at that. I haven't seen that.
Yes, sir.
As a status in New York, and also, again, when information is brought after the fact to us that there was a mistake, that's a concern.
Congressman, I think you will probably find that the mistakes that were made, and there were mistakes, affected every single site that was a competitor, to include some of those that received them.
And how have you responded to that, or what have...
I have responded to each person or each entity that had a complaint. I met with some who came in personally and explained why my choice, why even after I looked at the corrected information, why I had made the decision to stay with the entities that were awarded the orbiter. So there was nothing subjectively that changed significantly that would have made me, pick one other over some of the ones that already had it.
So what you're saying is, had you known this information prior to that decision, you still would have made the same decision?
What I'm saying
or
is... Or
did you know it?
What I'm saying is, had everything been totally accurate the way that I told the IG, when I testified for the IG investigation, I said that once I did find out there were mistakes, I went back and I looked at where those mistakes were made. I reevaluated the relative standing of all the entities that were being considered, and there was nothing of significance that caused me to want to change my mind about a location. That's all I'm saying.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Administrator and Mr. Chairman.
And Congressman Oster, I will. Almost every center, every facility that requested an orbiter, put in a request and a proposal, has subsequently received significant artifacts from the Space Shuttle program.
We appreciate that.
I mean, some to include full-scale mock-ups, simulators in which the astronauts trained, and it's, granted, everybody wanted an orbiter, but I think you will find, if you talk to some of them who got some of the other artifacts, from a practical perspective, while they didn't capture an orbiter that people can look at, from an educational and an outreach perspective, they won the prize, because the Museum of Flight, for example, has a full fuselage trainer. They can put kids in that thing. They can climb in and out of it. They can do exactly what astronauts did. No one who got a flown orbiter can do that, because none of the flown orbiters are going to be opened up. They're going to be there for display. Still incredible, but not what you can do with a trainer that you can actually use and let children, students, climb all over and go through.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before we go to Mr. Schiff, we're going to go to Mr. Adderholt, because he has to chair a hearing at 10 o'clock. Mr. Adderholt.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Bolden, good to see you today. It was good to see you last night at the event honoring Dr. Von Braun on his 100th birthday, which is we're celebrating this week. Just a couple things, and as Chairman says, I do have to slip out. I've got to chair another subcommittee in just a few minutes. But there are some concerns by many of us about the slow development of SLS. But I do want to say I appreciate the recent help to my staff from your personnel on that matter. Given the fact that you once said that SLS needs to catch up with the capsule program, the Orion, why is the request for FY13 so far below the authorized level?
Congressman, the funding for SLS, and I think we have tried to work with your staff to
right.
show you how the funding.
And I appreciate your working with
the funding for vehicle development. Now that we've broken out in separate budget lines, vehicle development from exploration, ground systems, and 21st century, plus construction of facilities, 4 different accounts, the funds for SLS meet the authorized level, if I am not mistaken. We have 1.3 set aside for SLS, and that is strictly for vehicle development. If you look at what's going on with the vehicle, the testing, we've fired the upper stage, we fired the J2X engine that's in development for SLS a couple of times now, so we are actually beginning to pick up the pace, and we're doing testing continuously, testing and development. Glenn has some cryogenic propellant storage test in work right now that will contribute to lowering the weight of the eventual 100 metric ton SLS that will enable it to take more payload to deep space. We're looking at a new fuel tank that is lower in weight, because it's a composite tank. So there's quite a bit of work in terms of technology development that's ongoing for the SLS that you won't see in the in phase 1, in the 70 metric ton version that will launch in 2017, but that you will see down the road. So I think we're doing as much, if not more, on SLS right now than we're actually doing on the multipurpose crew vehicle, because MPCV was so far along. MPCV has completed water drop tests. It's completed. It's done its vibration testing. It's well along compared to everything else. So we really are ramping up the work on the SLS.
Okay. Let me switch gears and say, what is the total cost so far spent on commercial space beyond the $500 million for COTS? Especially the CRS account and for actually resupplying the station.
We have only. I will take that question for the record, but the amounts that have been spent on COTS and CRS so far are documented. We have essentially spent nothing on CRS except for some of the additional milestones that we added to the COTS program to buy down the risk on cargo resupply. So we did advance those companies some funds from the CRS contract that they would not ordinarily have gotten until they actually got into CRS, because we're not into that yet. I think hopefully everyone knows we're still in the COTS program. The end of the COTS program will be the demonstration flights that are coming this spring and summer. SpaceX has one more, and right now their forecast is to launch on the 30th of April. That will be 2 demonstration flights in one. They'll do demo 2 and 3, provided everything goes well, and they will be finished with the COTS program, and then they'll move into CRS hopefully by end of summer, or at least fly one CRS mission in fiscal year 12. Orbital is a little bit farther behind, so we're hoping they'll fly their demonstration mission to close out COTS, and then they will begin to fly their CRS in early 2013. Other than what we spent in the commercial crew, what do we call it? CCDEV, the Commercial Crew Development Program. Those are the only funds that NASA has spent toward commercial crew to date. We have not selected, a vendor yet, so we've not spent any money on development of a system. That's what we're trying to decide now with the extension of the Space Act agreements and selection of competitors that will come this summer.
Okay. Like I said, I have got to slip out to chair another subcommittee, but thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Schiff.
Congressman, thank you very much for your remarks last night about
Well, it was
Dr.
good to be there, and thank you.
Von
I know that everyone appreciated your attendance
great.
there as well, but I will submit some more for the record.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, as you know, I'm deeply troubled by the NASA budget, in which science is cut overall by $162 million and planetary science by an astounding $300 million, resulting in the administration's short-sighted proposal to walk away from the ExoMars program with ESA that would have put an orbiter around Mars in 2016 and a lander on the surface 2 years later to begin the process of catching samples for a later return to Earth. I don't need to tell you that a Mars sample return is the top of the scientist list and that the 2018 mission is ranked at the top of the current planetary decadal. And I also don't need to remind you that the number 2 mission is a Europa orbiter that will give us insight into one of the solar system's most mysterious bodies. And if there was any question about the priorities of this committee, as the language Mr. Culberson proposed last year makes clear, those planetary decadal priorities are our priorities as well. No element of the American space program has generated more public excitement and interest over the past decade than our robotic exploration of the red planet. In the days following Spirit's landing in January of 2004, NASA web servers crashed under an assault from literally millions of people worldwide who wanted to see the latest pictures from the Martian surface. These proposed cuts not only threaten the most successful exploration program in NASA history, they also imperil what is certainly the world's most specialized workforce, the engineers and scientists at JPL who specialize in entry, descent, and landing on other planets. I don't need to tell you how difficult it is to do this kind of work. There have been more failures than successes at landing vehicles on Mars, and ours is the only country to have yet succeeded. But this is a workforce and a capability that cannot survive long periods of inactivity. If we adopt your reconfigured Mars program, a drastic scaling back of our capacity to do this kind of edge-of-the-envelope science will be the inevitable consequence. I think cannibalizing the Mars program, which gets closer to unlocking the secrets of Mars past with each mission and discovery, is a major step backwards for NASA and the nation. while human spaceflight has been stuck in low Earth orbit for 3 decades and now is reliant on the Russians, and with James Webb still years away from launch, the Mars program is the key driver of public support for the space program. In short, I think the budget proposal is a disaster for our leadership in space. And I want to thank the Chairman sincerely for calling a timeout to give us a chance to fully explore this proposal, and I hope come up with something much better. I am perplexed at the responses that you gave to the Chairman's questions at the outset of this hearing when he asked you why the disproportionate and devastating cuts to planetary science and in particular the Mars program. And your response was, I quote, "The Mars program was in the best shape." I don't understand that answer. That's an answer that says in order to make budget cuts, we savage the most successful program we have. I don't think you can come here and tout MSL, because MSL, this committee is about the future. It's about what we are going to do in the future. And to rely on MSL is to rely on our past. That was a program that was developed largely under the Bush administration. And for this administration at NASA to say that this is proof of our ongoing commitment to Mars just falls desperately short to me. Because if you were before this committee while MSL was still on the drawing board, you'd be coming before us to tell us to pull the plug on MSL. And I think that is just a tragic place to be. We now have a decadal survey, top priority that will not be undertaken if your proposal is accepted, will not be taken by the United States. It will be taken by the Europeans now in partnership with the Russians. And I think it is a sad state of affairs when we're already reliant on the Russians to get a lift to the space station. We're also going to tell the Europeans they can't count on us anymore. They need to count on the Russians for the top priority of our own scientists. I also don't understand the response you gave to the Chairman about the decadal when he asked you, isn't this inconsistent with the decadal priorities? And your answer was something to the effect of, no, canceling the ExoMars missions, canceling the top priority of the decadal, which is to catch those samples this decade, is somehow advancing the decadal priorities. That is a very Orwellian answer in my view that says that the way to go forward is to go backward. The way to go up is to go down. And just by saying so doesn't make it so. If we walk away from the decadal, we are walking away from the decadal. And no amount of spin or rhetoric can change that fact. What I would like to try to understand is when you came before our committee last year, when you met individually with members of this committee, and you said that we could do a flagship mission to Mars, that we had the budget to do a flagship mission to Mars, and we agreed with you on doing a flagship, even though it meant condensing some of what had been planned. When did you make the decision during the last 12 months that that was no longer the case? Was that a decision you made, or was that a decision OMB made? And if it was a decision that OMB made, why is OMB deciding what the planetary decadal priorities ought to be? I understand they can give you a top line, but the thing I don't understand is the top line for the NASA budget is essentially flat from the year before. And I don't think you or we on this committee expect it to be any different. None of us thought that the NASA budget would be dramatically improved. So there's no surprise in going from last year to this year in terms of what the top line is. And what I would like to know is, did this proposal to abandon the flagship missions, did that come from you, or was that proposed by OMB?
Congressman, the decision came from me.
Well, the decision, I'm not asking where the decision
You asked me where the decision came from. I told you it came from me.
I'm asking where the proposal came from. Because
the decision came from me.
I understand the decision came from you. Where did the proposal come from? Did you propose this, or did OMB propose this?
I asked the question because I spend time with my counterpart in the European Space Agency, Mr. Jean-Jacques Dordain, who has the responsibility for managing the 19 nations that are a part of ESA. And as we talked from 2009, when I signed my first letter of intent with him to continue to talk about the ExoMars mission. And I think if you look at documentation, if you talk to him, we never committed to the ExoMars mission. We always had difficulty trying to determine that we would have the funds.
Which is, did the proposal come from you, or did it come from OMB?
The question that led to my decision came from me. I asked how are we going to do how are we going to do a Mars sample return based on the budget that we have currently? And this was not this budget. This was the budget in place for 2012, even the budget for 2011. What is the level of detail in the 2018 mission? And at that time, when I was told, well, we are developing the 2018 mission with ESA, I said, well, okay, what about the sample return? Well, that will come on subsequent missions. That is not something that I was...
Administrator, the sample return was always going to come on subsequent missions.
Yeah, but that's not the impression that people had.
No one was ever proposing that we were going to go and catch the samples and bring them back on the same mission. That was always the proposal.
Well, the only person who didn't understand that was me.
My question, Mr. Administrator, I still haven't got an answer to, which is, where did the proposal to cancel the flagship missions come from? Did that come from you, or did it come from OMB?
The proposal came from coordinated efforts between my science experts, the people in NASA, our talks with the White House, with OMB and OSTP, and our talks with our international partners.
And when did this happen?
This happened over the last 12 months. It started happening, actually, as early as 2009 when I signed the letter of intent.
Then when you came in here last year and you told us we had the resources to do the flagship
At the time,
mission,
I thought we had the resources to do
But now
that
you're
because the
telling me
budget
that
was
back
$2 billion higher than it is right
But
now.
now you're telling me back in 2009 you decided you didn't have the resources?
I did not decide I didn't have the resources, and I began to question whether we had the resources then because, as I said, you and others fully understood that ExoMars was not a sample return. I was not that smart. I thought ExoMars was a sample return because that's what the decadal survey said.
You understood from us last year that our priority was to do the top of the decadal survey.
Yes, sir.
And as the NASA budget hasn't changed, I can only conclude that that you and OMB and the White House had already made the decision you were going to cancel the flagship mission and just didn't want to tell us.
Yes, sir.
Or, apropos of the Chairman's question about why you want to remove the language limiting the cost overruns on Webb, that it's now your view that those costs are going to continue to increase, and therefore you need to come in and cannibalize the successful Mars program.
Yeah.
Because something changed over the last 12 months.
A number of things changed over the last 12 months, and my growth into this job and my understanding of the complexity of the missions we were doing and our ability to mount a sample return mission changed. My understanding of that changed.
So
and I could not...
It's not a change in Webb from last year.
Yes, it is. There is a change in Webb from last year. Last year, Webb was gone. And I felt that the James Webb Space Telescope was so critical to this nation and the international science community that we could not make that short-sighted decision. And so I fought to get funding for the James Webb Space Telescope. As I told the chairman, what I would have liked to have done was asked for enough money to launch James Webb in 2014. That would have been irresponsible because that would have decimated the science budget.
When you came,
we have a program right now.
When you came to this committee to argue for Webb,
yes, sir,
and the chairman raised the concern about Webb,
yes,
you didn't tell the chairman or any of us that you want to do Webb, but by the way, we're not going to be able to do Mars if we do this.
I didn't know that at the time.
And when did you have this epiphany that
Congressman,
you couldn't afford Mars anymore?
This epiphany it wasn't an epiphany. It was a successive understanding of our posture fiscally and a successive understanding on my part of our technical capability that told me that I could not, and as I told Jean-Jacques Dadin, I cannot in good conscience allow them to continue to think that the United States is going to be there for them on a sample return mission in 2028 that we cannot support, we cannot afford.
Right.
And so I said, we need to step back, and as I told them, most of this happened before Christmas, because we had people in Paris, France, in negotiations with Roscosmos and the European Space Agency, and I finally decided, I called Jean-Jacques and I said, I can't in good conscience allow our folk to continue to sit there discussing something that we know we will not be able to support. And so, if we want to be able to launch in the 2018-2020 window, and that's what Dr. John Grunsfeld is trying to do now, to find a series of missions that are decreased in scope but accomplish the basic objectives of setting up a subsequent Mars sample return mission. And I think we will do that.
And Mr. Administrator, I can't in good conscience support a budget that says that that America's days of leadership in space science are limited, that Europe, you can't count on us, that China is ascendant in its Mars program, that you got to go to Russia and later China, that we're going to walk away from our own decadal priority, our own top priority of our science community, that when we're this tantalizingly close to finding the building blocks of life on another planet, that we're going to walk away, and that we're going to rest on the laurels of the administrations and the generations that went before. I can't in good conscience support that kind of proposal. And I yield back.
Congressman, as I mentioned to you once before, I would hope that you would not put MSL in the past when you communicate with people at the Jet Propulsion Labs. We have the hardest part of that mission coming, and for them to believe that their representative feels that that's something in the past, the most difficult part of that mission.
I don't think the mission is in the past, and no one has greater respect for the work that those brilliant people are doing than I do. But what I resent is coming in here and using MSL as a justification to cancel the future of the Mars program and the flagship missions. And I can tell you, Mr. Administrator, there is no one at JPL working on MSL or any other program that will accept the argument that because they are working so hard and had such great success with MSL thus far, that we should cancel our future flagships.
And Congressman, we have not given up on flagships. We have not given up on future flagships. What I have Dr. Grunsfeld doing is trying to come up with a plan that will allow us to strategically approach the next flagship mission to Mars that will enable us to do a sample return mission. That is still a primary objective of our Mars exploration program. We're trying to accomplish the science objectives of the joint ESA-NASA collaboration that was going on ExoMars, and we intend to facilitate their success to the greatest amount we can. To also accomplish the priorities of the planetary decadal, which said a Mars sample return mission is our #1 objective. They did not say ExoMars. They said ExoMars is an example of a mission that will facilitate that success. There are more ways to do that than participating in ExoMars. We will cooperate with the Europeans and maybe the Russians, but it will be an international effort that brings us a sample return mission, and it will happen in the foreseeable future. We are not giving up on Mars. We are not decimating the Mars program. We have what I think is a very ambitious Mars program. We have not given up on Europa. We have 3 studies underway right now just looking at how we can attack the planet Europa, the moon. And we have got to figure out how we prioritize our science budget so that we can accomplish as many of those goals as possible. We can't do them all. We cannot do them all. So we are trying to prioritize such that we will achieve the objectives.
The last thing I'm
going
to say, and I appreciate the indulgence of the chairman because I know I've taken more than my time. Those are all fine words, but they don't make it so. And defunding Europa doesn't mean that you are pushing forward with Europa. Canceling the flagships doesn't mean you're pushing forward with an aggressive Mars program. It's exactly the opposite. I wish that we could all get by on good words, but what matters is the deeds, and the deeds right now are canceling the flagship missions, they're canceling Europa, they're ceding to Russia the role of, with ESA, meeting the #1 priority of our scientists and the decadal survey. And that is a very sad proposal and one that I can't accept, and I yield back.
Yes, and Congressman, I promise we will discuss the status of the Mars program after we land on Mars in August, and I think you will see the interest in Mars explode. So I think we don't have the program in place that I would like to have because I don't have endless money, but we have a program in place that I think will bring great results. And we have not given up our leadership on exploration of Mars, whether human or robotic. So I think we respectfully disagree on the status of the program right now, but I think we have the same objective in mind, and we'll get there.
Mr. Yoder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, appreciate you being here today. I appreciate you coming back. We had you here last year and had a good conversation, and we know that this committee is committed, and all of your hardworking staff that I've had a chance to interact with are committed to the future of space exploration and the United States continuing to be a leader in that endeavor. I'm a big fan of what you do at NASA, not only from the economic and scientific issues, but just from your ability to inspire Americans to dream. And I know you've had a long career in service, and there are probably other things you could be doing with your time, and I appreciate the fact that you're dedicating your interests to trying to help inspire Americans and to continue to help the United States be a pioneer in space exploration. I note in your budget that there's been a decline in resources that Congress has provided, and that's kind of rare. I've been on appropriations now this is the second year. Mostly we look at big increases on the discretionary side, requests for even more. Washington's sort of its version of a spending cut is not as big of an increase as you requested for many agencies. And so you're actually, I can see, dealing with constrained resources. You're really trying to be creative, looking at what you're doing with commercialization of space exploration and trying to continue to pioneer under restricted resources. And so I thought I might just give you an opportunity to give us an idea of what we could do if we had additional resources. What the potential is for the United States space exploration if we had the ability to find additional resources. What we are, certainly when we're looking at shortening the distance between Earth and Mars in terms of the speed, some of the things that it's just a matter of getting to the technology, and where are we in terms of those types of things? What's on the horizon? What's on the 25, 50-year plan? And are these things that we're trying to get to someday a function of resources, or are they a function of capabilities that we're not sure we will ever obtain? We have dreams, but can we get there? And if you had, unlimited resources, say, what could we actually be doing at this point?
Congressman, I won't conjecture on what we could do with ultimate resources, but I will say
additional resources.
You asked two questions. The first question I will answer. The biggest challenge is capabilities. It's not, and resources do bring capabilities, but the shortcoming for us right now as the agency responsible for maintaining America's leadership in exploration is capabilities. And that's why when we talk about priorities, while not one of the top three, technology development is a critical priority for NASA. It is only through the technology development, whether we're talking about cryogenic propellant and storage, cryogenic propellant transfer, solar electric propulsion, those things will help us answer the questions that you talked about, speed in going from Earth to Mars. Those are capabilities that we have in development. Our space technology program has over 1,000 projects right now that are funded. The increased funding I would like to see is full funding for the budget that the President requested, because we have crafted that budget such that it fully supports the three priorities agreed to by the President and the Congress, but it also enables us to take care of the priorities, internal priorities that we have, which are trying to craft a strategic program for robotic exploration of Mars, as Congressman Schiff talks about, that will facilitate achievement of the science objectives going there, that will enable us to fulfill the priority of the decadal survey, which is to facilitate a future Mars sample return mission, all of which support the President's challenge to us to put humans in orbit or in the Martian environment by the mid-2030s. It is critical for us to get the President's budget request funded to the level he requested, or we do stand an opportunity or a chance of relinquishing our leadership, and I don't want to do that. Anyone who thinks we are not the leader today, I would beg to differ. Everyone still looks at us. Our European partners, in spite of the differences that we have had over ExoMars, that is not the only thing that we do with our European partners. Our European partners are really dependent upon us for James Webb, because they are a partner. They are providing the launch vehicle. They are providing some of the instruments. The Europeans work with us on aeronautics. They are dependent on us being there, and we are there. You can go through and look at what we're doing with South American nations. We are the leaders in the world in exploration, whether it's human or robotic. We have not relinquished that leadership. To give up and not fund the President's budget would be to say we have decided that we are okay being a follower. So that's why I am fighting for this budget. We have done the absolute best we could do to prioritize and make sure that we retain our leadership.
Well, and I think reassuring the country and the world that the United States is going to continue to be the pioneer in this endeavor is something we have to continue to do. Your statements are critical to that. I know certainly when we're back in our districts and we're talking to to regular folks who are inspired by space exploration, young people in our district, without having the shuttles now and seeing American astronauts go to Russia to be able to head to space doesn't provide, I think, that assurance that you are also saying that you want the country to have. And so it's partly the shuttle program was a great symbol, and every time those shuttles went up, it was a reassurance, I think, to Americans that we were charting the course. And so, however we continue to get to that point, I think we want to be supportive. Are there things that Congress is doing besides the funding issue that would be helpful to stop doing, either on the regulatory side, or are there things that make it more difficult for NASA to achieve its mission because of another factor?
Congressman, there are issues that we're working on with the administration right now to bring proposals to you. I think the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, all of us have talked about modification or relief from some of the restrictions that we have that impede the Americans' ability to do trade or to do development in some fields of technology with other nations. But that's beyond the purview of NASA. But those are things that I think I would echo what other people in positions of leadership in this administration have said.
I think certainly going forward, the concept of the commercialization of space is going to continue to be a part of space exploration is going to continue to be a part of NASA's mission, and that utilization and partnership with private industry appears to be a very successful way to approach some of these cost constraints we have, and harnessing the creativity of the free market, the entrepreneurs, the innovators out there that come up with their own ideas, and all those programs I think have been helpful. We might speak about that a little bit, and we were trying to look at some data back in the office, and the commercial cargo program, my understanding is that NASA's cost models would have had SpaceX's Falcon 9 launcher cost $4 billion, where SpaceX developed it for $400 million. Are there other examples where we've been able to do things in a more efficient way, utilizing commercialization?
Congressman, there are countless, let me not say countless, there are examples that I can provide for you that show where reliance on private entities to do the development with us as a partner have resulted in cost savings. We are not done with commercial cargo and crew to the International Space Station, so I would not be one that would want to hang laurels on where we are yet. But so far, the trend and the subjective indication is that we are definitely saving funds. When you look at the commercial crew program, we've spent hundreds of millions instead of billions in getting to the point where we're about to have private companies deliver cargo to the International Space Station. At this point of development in a human capability, we have spent hundreds of millions as opposed to billions as we would have done or as we did in past NASA programs. The only difference being that we have relied on industry to do the development at their pace and using their brain power with us as consultants, as opposed to making it our project that we dictate to them the pace and the content. We're not dictating pace and content, they are.
Well, I appreciate that, and something certainly we're going to have to continue, I think, all to work together going forward to determine what that best balance is. But I think you continue to try to find ways to be creative within the resources available to remain a pioneer there. So I appreciate that. I want to talk to you a little about plutonium. As I understand it, plutonium is a critical fuel source that NASA relies on. Where are we at in terms of the amount of plutonium available? Are there steps that we need to take to make sure that we have plutonium available for NASA going forward?
Congressman, I'll get you the exact amounts, but I think we have adequately funded our portion toward startup again of plutonium production that would take care of missions that we, NASA, envision will be doing in the foreseeable future. But I'll get you the exact answer on that.
Good. Thank you, General. I appreciate your testimony today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If the gentleman would yield for a minute, this is in concert with Air Force Space Command and others, right, that you feel comfortable in terms of where you are, right?
In terms of plutonium production?
Yes, yeah.
I'm comfortable where we are, other than the fact that nobody wants to spend money. You know, if you want to ask me who I'd like to see some other agency pay for it all, that's not going to happen. So I am satisfied that we have been asked to pay our fair share. But I will get the exact numbers on that, because
Thank you.
I've got numbers running around in my head, but I don't want to give you one that may be old.
Thank you, General. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Culberson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The General Bolden, I'm actually sitting here listening to the testimony, just quietly grieving for our country. I'm a native Houstonian. I grew up with the Apollo program and got my first telescope when I was 12. I've been an amateur astronomer literally since I was a boy, and it's been NASA has been an important part of my life, an important part of the life of this country. And when a major public relations firm that specializes in public opinion of private companies did a survey for Sean O'Keefe, they discovered that NASA had the highest positive perception, public image, in the eyes of the public. NASA had a popularity rating that was equivalent to that of the Marine Corps. And thank you again for your service to the country, sir. The popularity of NASA is unsurpassed. And I could not agree more strongly with the comments of my good friend Mr. Schiff, that what the budget that the President has put forward is clearly putting the best days of planetary exploration behind us. It's visionless. It's just really, I just grieve for my country. I grieve for NASA to see the utter lack of vision, utter lack of interest of the administration in our magnificent space program. All the men and women who have put their heart and soul into exploring other worlds, into putting men and women into space, need to know that the Congress stands behind them, even though the President doesn't have any interest, obviously, in our space program, demonstrates very little. Very sad to see the lack of interest of the agency in pursuing the exploration of the planets. And the Congress is completely committed to support you, sir. And I know you're here carrying a message from the administration. You're sort of trapped. I know, General, you're not able to really speak probably as freely as you'd like. So I think I'm very reluctant to pick too much on you, because you really are here on behalf of the administration, and I know you're probably not thrilled in your heart of hearts with this budget proposal. And we face a terrible dilemma as a country because of the size of the debt and the deficit. The budget which the House is likely to pass, and necessarily so, is going to have to reduce spending below what the President's even suggested, and our subcommittee is going to have terribly difficult choices to make as well. But there's arm-in-arm agreement among all of us here. You're among friends who we're all passionate in our support for NASA, for the space program. But the planetary program has taken, and Adam is exactly right. You can say it, but it doesn't make it so. It's a devastating cut to the planetary program. The administration's budget proposal walks away from America's leadership role in planetary exploration. Fundamentally, essentially just cancels the Mars program. I don't think it comes from OMB. I think it does come from the administration. The cancellation of the European Space Agency agreement is going to make the Europeans distrust us deeply in the future. There's no way that you can say the Mars program survives. There's no way you can say the planetary program can survive a cut of 21%. So it's I just want to circle. I want to circle back to a fundamental fact that the Congress makes the laws. We're the ones that have to set policy in so many different areas. It's the President's job as Chief Executive Officer to execute the law and to ensure that it's carried out. The law, statutory law enacted by the Congress, says, and signed into law by the President November 18th, just a few short months ago, says, quote, NASA shall implement the recommendations of the most recent National Research Council Planetary Decadal Survey and shall follow the Decadal Survey's recommended decision rules regarding program implementation, including strict adherence to the recommendation that NASA include in a balanced program a flagship class mission which may be executed in cooperation with one or more international partners, if such mission can be appropriately descoped and all NASA costs for such mission can be accommodated within the overall funding levels appropriated by Congress. The law is unambiguous. This is not optional. This is not a recommendation of the Congress. It's mandatory, just as with the construction of a 130-ton rocket to go beyond low Earth orbit. What do you recommend? What should this subcommittee do? I mean, what amendment should Mr. Schiff and I put together? What portion of NASA funding should we withhold in order to ensure you follow the law, as the chairman unfortunately had to do with this, with the heavy lift launch vehicle?
Congressman, I think we are following the law. The language that you just read said we shall follow to the best extent possible the recommendation of the Decadal Survey, and it also says that we should do the best we can do to collaborate with our, I don't know whether it said European, I think it said international partners, if the missions can be descoped. That is exactly what we're trying to do.
And the missions have?
We are attempting to descope our discussions with the Europeans on ExoMars. I'll give you an example of incremental descoping. The original 2018 mission was an American lander, a European lander. That I knew right away we could not do. Neither of us could afford that. We descoped and said, let's do one lander. You guys can do it. We'll provide the landing system.
Yes, sir.
We are continuing to try to descope what
being
was
done.
the ExoMars mission into a series of strategically planned incremental missions that will lead to an ultimate flagship mission to do a sample return. That has not gone away.
Yes,
we are still working to that.
Yes,
so two things I'll
with
say.
that.
Marines are never surrounded in the first place. So I am not surrounded. I don't feel surrounded. The second thing is, and I need to make sure people understand, I'm excited about this budget. I don't take direction from any other agency. I take direction from the President. And so for people who think that OMB tells me what to do or OSTP tells me what to do, that does not happen. I go in and I argue just like any other head of agency or just like any other secretary, and we come out of meetings where we are discussing priorities. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose.
Yes, sir.
If I ever won every argument, then something's wrong with our system of government. We are not trailing any other nation in exploration, contrary to what some people may feel. Every nation in the world wants to work with us, to include the Europeans. And I emphasize again, we have far more that we are doing cooperatively with other nations in the world than our Mars program.
No question. We really sincerely appreciate your service to the country and appreciate the dilemma that you find yourself in. But the Decadal Survey, the language that we in the Congress enacted, subcommittee enacted, and the Congress followed through on, passed by both the House and the Senate and signed by the President, makes it mandatory that NASA follow the recommendations of the Decadal Survey. So you've got a plan for planetary exploration. It's called the Decadal Survey. Congress has formally adopted it as the vision for the future for the nation, because that has always been the vision for the future for the nation. Is in the Decadal Survey, the planetary scientists get together, of course, and pool their talent and their resources and their opinions and make a series of recommendations that NASA has always flown, by the way, among those recommendations, the flagship missions in each decade's Decadal Survey. This is not optional. Now, I understand about the descoping. That's being done. The members of this subcommittee and Mr. Schiff and I know in particular, bird dog this pretty relentlessly. We're aware that the missions have been descoped. Both the Europa mission and the Mars mission are being descoped, have been descoped, and within affordable levels within the confines of what has always been the planetary science budget. So obviously the international partnership is there. The missions can be descoped. Funding, as Mr. Schiff said, for NASA is been essentially flat. We're in a tough budget environment. We're going to work very hard to find additional funding. what is it that, what does the subcommittee need to do to make NASA follow the law here?
Support the President's budget request?
But the President's budget request walks away from...
No, sir.
Well, of course it does. You can't, Mr. Schiff is right. You can't say it and make it so. You're walking away from the...
Congressman, I'm not trying to make anything so. I'm saying we have an effort underway right now with a Mars planning group that is trying to find a a method to restructure our Mars robotic and human exploration program to put synergy in the science and human exploration that we have not had before, to try to find a number of smaller missions that we can mount that will accomplish the scientific objectives that a flagship mission would have done, such that when the funding is available for a flagship mission, we can mount that speedily and bring samples back to Earth. That is what we're trying to do. That's the exact guidance in the terms of reference for the Mars Planning Group that is presently beginning to work under the mentorship or the consultation of
That's
Mr.
just not consistent with reality. I'm sorry. It's not consistent with reality. The President's
Congressman,
budget
I'm not
walks away
gonna-
from the Mars program, as well as the these are unacceptable cuts to the planetary mission, and I find it very disheartening and disturbing.
Congressman, you and I just have to respectfully agree to disagree. I disagree. I don't think we're walking away from anything. I don't think the President has walked away from Mars. The President talks about Mars every time I go and listen to him talk
Talking
to
about it
students.
doesn't make it so.
Congressman, nothing makes it so except performance. And so on August 5th, I think you will see the first level of performance from NASA on our Mars program. We will land the Mars Science Laboratory, Curiosity, on the surface. We will begin to core. We will begin to get samples. We will begin to analyze those samples. Humans around the world will begin to see color, 3D images from the surface of Mars. That has never been done before. That's performance. If I don't do that, you're not going to want to give me any money.
Well,
once I do that, hopefully you will be excited as I am about our Mars program.
Well, we really appreciate your service to the nation, Administrator, and we thank you, all the men and women in NASA, and I want all of them who are listening and maybe following this hearing to know that the members of this subcommittee are united arm in arm in support of America's space program, and we're going to make sure to restore the vision and the excitement that the program has always had, despite the best efforts of this administration to throw a wet blanket over it.
Thank you, Mr. Culbertson. I have a number of questions. We're going to go back, but I want to kind of spend a little time on the commercial crew issue, which I think is an area of a lot of concern with regard to the cost. And NASA's commercial crew development strategy has a total price tag of about $5 billion. Under current assumptions, that money would produce crew transportation in 2017 to serve as a space station, to which the administration is only currently committed through 2020. From a purely fiscal perspective, why does it make sense to invest so much money in a capability that might only be used for 3 years?
Congressman, we think that provided the international partners and the scientific and technological community of the United States are willing, space station can be extended well beyond 2020. We've already completed the engineering certification, so we are not planning, I mean, I don't have it funded yet, but I am not planning to end utilization of space station in 2020.
Well, you probably won't be here, so.
My job is to
Yes, sir.
My job is to facilitate the ability of future administrators to do the things that I cannot do given the current constraints, and that is, for example, to be able to execute a robust flagship mission that will include the outer planets, whether it's Mars or Jupiter. We've got Pluto New Horizons on the way. That will give us information we don't have right now. We've got Juno on the way to Jupiter, so we will learn things about that planet.
Okay, coming back to the commercial crew, it wouldn't be unusual for a program of this complexity to experience engineering challenges that could cause the schedule to slip significantly, as we've seen in the commercial cargo program. How much did the commercial cargo program slip?
Congressman, I think if you look at what the original assessment was, it's probably a couple of years.
Couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the chances that technical issues could delay a commercial crew capability beyond 2017? And how does that impact your answer to the previous question?
When we looked at the date that we thought we could bring in a commercial crew program, the funding that we had gave us assurance that we could do it by 2017. So we're confident that given the things that can go wrong that we have anticipated, we think we can bring in a program by 2017.
Well, so you think there are no...
No, sir. I do think there are. I think there are unknown unknowns out there, and we know about how much time it generally takes to deal with issues that you don't understand. And
keeping the 2020 date in mind.
Yes, sir.
People are talking about. Okay, last month, Space News reported that NASA's Director of Commercial Spaceflight Development, Phil McAllister, said that if the Commercial Crew Program, quote, doesn't really make sense if it doesn't receive the full $830 million request this year and in the future. Do you agree with that comment? He said, quote, this is Phil McAllister, who works for you, that if the Commercial Crew Program, quote, doesn't really make sense if it doesn't receive the full $830 million request this year and in future years. Do you agree with that comment?
I'm not sure how Phil characterized his comment or where the quote was taken from, but the Commercial Crew Program makes all the sense in the world.
No, I understand that. I just wanted to know if you agreed. He said it doesn't really make sense if it doesn't receive the full $830.
I would not agree with that statement.
Okay. And given that the administration is asking for a commitment of nearly $4 billion more in development subsidies over the next 5 years, does it make sense to continue this program if it doesn't receive the funding? So you, in essence, have kind of answered that.
Congressman, what I am saying is we have requested an amount that is
I understand
significant, but I'm just saying we have agreed because of the fiscal challenges. We have agreed to come down on the amount of money that we requested for Commercial Crew. Our original request was in the neighborhood of $1.2 to $1.5 billion annually to support that program when we were trying to close the gap between shuttle and the availability of an American capability. We did not get that funding, and as I told you all last year, if I did not get, I think I had set an arbitrary floor of $500 million. We didn't get that, and so we are now stuck with a 2017 availability date for Commercial Crew. All I can say is if we are fully funded to the amount requested by the President, I can bring in Commercial Crew by 2017, and depending on what the unknown unknowns are, we may be lucky. And we may bring it in sooner than that, but it is too early to tell. We have not even looked at, this summer we will get an opportunity to look at the proposals from industry on what they see as a system. Okay. We've not looked at systems before. We've looked at modules, we've looked at launch vehicles, but not an integrated system.
Well, I think it's helpful that you didn't agree with Mr. McAllister. That was the point.
I do not agree that any amount of money says that the program is not worthwhile. That's not true.
Well, what is the primary goal of the Commercial Crew Program? To close the gap that we have to rely on the Russians, or to seed as many commercial companies as possible with development subsidies?
Commercial Crew Program has multiple objectives. My number one objective as the NASA Administrator is to put a program into place that supports the International Space Station, that gives us an American capability to get our own crews to orbit and not have to be reliant on the Russians. But also because I am the NASA Administrator and I am compelled to support the national space policy, it is also to grow the economy. It is to build a viable commercial space industry that brings jobs to this nation and helps increase funding in our economy, and it is doing that already.
I would think most members up here would agree that the top priority is closing the gap and not seeding the companies, but maybe I'm just speaking for myself. During your testimony before the House Science Committee, Congressman Costello from Illinois asked you about the Commercial Crew Program and whether it was worth the investment given the lengthy development. You responded, quote, and this is your quote, "We are going to have to develop a commercial capability for the benefit of the American economy, but it may not make it in time to serve the International Space Station." Did you say that?
Congressman, I probably said that when we were talking about, I said I don't like to deal in conjecture about funding. And I think the question sort of, if I remember correctly, it talked about what happens if you get less money, and a statement that I would make if you asked me the question. If we get less money, the gap's going to widen. And we probably won't make 2017. You could fund us to a level that we could not have Commercial Crew available by 2020, but that still does not make the program worthless, useless. if the primary objective of some is to produce or facilitate the success of a commercial industry that brings jobs back to this country and feeds the economy, then you could do that over any period of time. That is not my primary objective. As I said before, my primary objective as the NASA Administrator is closing the gap so that I don't have to rely on the Russians to take my crews to the International Space Station.
But if 2020, and you know a lot about this, and I have great respect for you, and I think people say that sometimes when they're ready to put a dagger in somebody.
That's okay.
I think I do. I think you are a good person. You are one of the nicest people that I've ever met in this business, and I appreciate your service to the country. So we're not trying to, but if we're talking about 2020 and we're talking about 2017 maybe, and then we have, but it may not make it in time to serve, then when Mr. Schiff is talking and Mr. Culberson is talking, I mean, I tend to feel, their concern because I want America to be number one. So if we are even reasonably concerned that the commercial crew program may not deliver in time to serve the International Space Station, I guess the question somebody would have to ask, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but why should taxpayers spend an additional $4 billion and when dollars subsidizing companies to develop these systems when other programs that are meritorious, have to be cut? So, I mean, is it time to revisit some of the assumptions about the commercial crew program? Now, the commercial crew people, and they're probably out there now, have hired a lot of lobbyists in this town. This has been a big job enhancing for the lobbyists downtown. But that's not necessarily what's necessarily in the best interest of the American people. So, do you have a Plan B option for the space station?
You mean if commercial crew is not available before the agreed upon time for station is reached?
Right.
Plan B for us is to make sure that we select more than one alternative this summer to carry forward. That's our Plan B. It's Plan A and Plan B. If we end up with one provider, the chances of being able to get to 2017 successfully and affordably is diminished. So the reason we selected $830 million is because it provides us more than one provider, more than one candidate provider. And I don't even want to talk about the numbers. The numbers depend on what the level of funding is. Ideally, you would like to have 3, 4 American competitors vying for a contract to carry American crew members to space, such that you would have minimum of 2 when you ended up who are available to do that, such that you have redundant, reliable, routine access to space via American companies. If we go down to 1 at the end of the game, that's okay, but now our redundant backup is where we are today, and that's Russia, and I don't want to be there.
Well, will we be relieved of the cost of purchasing Soyuz seats as soon as the first commercial crew capability enters into service?
As soon as the first commercial crew capability enters into service, I'm done.
So there'll be no overlap services?
To my knowledge, we have no plans to go back and forth. Once we have an American capability.
We have heard there may be an overlap period of time. So
I think what
once it's over, it's over.
Congressman, what you may be referring to is because we need relief from INCSNA, from the Iran, North Korea. If we get, in order to get relief from that, it goes beyond the period that we anticipate an American capability will be available. So that may be what people are talking about when you say, will there be overlap? The INCSNA waiver will overlap the time that American capability becomes available, but I have no intention of using Soyuz once I have an American carrier that can get us to ISS.
How much is it per trip?
$450 million per crew member right now with Soyuz.
$450 million.
To train a crew member and get them to the International Space Station. And that's money that is going to Russia. That is taxpayer money going to Russia, not going to an American company, not going to jobs in the United States of America, not going to any of your districts, because unless somebody there is contracting, as a subcontractor to Roscosmos or to Energia, it's not coming here.
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding. That's a year. That's not per seat.
Well, it is a year that we pay them.
What is it per seat? What?
So I think it's 63 million per seat.
And is the price locked in?
It's locked in for now, you know, but there will come a time if we don't close the gap.
When is it locked in until?
Congressman, let me get back to you. I think it's 2016, but I'll verify that.
Okay. The administration believes that maximizing competition is a cost control measure. However, it also ensures that we will spend hundreds of millions of dollars on companies who will never take crew to the International Space Station, either because they fail to develop a capability or because there isn't enough demand for the International Space Station transportation to award multiple contracts. How do we know the value of this competition provided is worth the added cost of adding so many firms who won't make it to the end? Could adequate competition be provided through down selecting to 2 companies and maintaining the option of using the Soyuz services?
Congressman, our intent is to eventually down select to 2 or more, as you say. There is no, I don't think there is any competitive advantage, price advantage, or schedule advantage to down selecting to 1 at this time, or to down selecting to 2 before we have the proposals in from industry so that we can tell who's serious, who's following the design requirements that we have laid out and provided to everybody. And that will take us a while.
So there's
14 to 20 months.
So there, you know, we defeated the Nazis in 4 years. And so there's no effort of making this basically a wartime proposal, bringing together the very best minds in the 4 companies or the 3 companies or the 2 companies. Now, knowing that everyone would get something and be a participant in some future, but in the end result is like musical chairs, there's only going to be one that gets to sit down on the chair. So there's no consideration of bringing the companies together.
Congressman, we have encouraged companies to collaborate to the greatest extent possible. If you look at, there is one potential entrant that is a collaboration of an American company and a European company. I think there is one that is potentially a collaboration between 2 American companies. I can't mandate that the companies come together, and I referred you to one of our American companies that I think, I'm not even sure if they're planning to propose, but I felt it would be prudent to have someone from industry say what their thinking was about collaboration. And I think, I'm not sure what he told you, but what he's told me and what others have told me is that the time to do that has passed, that, you know, nobody wants to come together right now.
Okay, I have a lot of other, but I'll go to Mr. Fatal.
Administrator, I think it's, I think a number of things. One, I think it's the administration has set the nation on a course through commercial cargo and crew that will benefit us for decades to come in terms of reduced costs and building a commercial space capacity that will mean jobs and the like. The resistance to it is notable. You know, the idea that we would not believe that American industry has the ability and the ingenuity to take on something that the government has been doing on a regular basis, on a routine basis, through shuttle flights. I don't really understand. I know that I think that it can be done, and I do note that the Virgin Galactic has just sold their 500th seat in terms of for space tourism. So the idea that private companies can't do this and that we can't use competition as a way to drive down costs, I think we can. So I'm a big believer. I do agree with the chairman, however, that what we see in the private sector in some of the most successful work that's done, at some point competition gets you to a certain point, and then cooperation gets you to the kind of gold medal. And so that there will be a time in which through this process, I believe some of these companies will work together. I think we got to get the politics out of our space exploration efforts. I'm totally agree with my colleague from California about these cuts in in this planetary science. But when the gentleman from Texas brings in this attacks on the administration, I think it's non-productive. What we need to be focusing on is the fact that we have an administration that even in the toughest of times is prepared to commit American tax dollars to our continued global leadership in space. And we may have differences about how we ought to proceed. You know, I have differences with my wife on almost any day I want to go out and play golf that she thinks I should be doing something on her list. So there are going to be disagreements. But what I think that the chairman is trying to do is move us on the substance of these issues and not get mired down in politics. There's no politics in our competition with emerging countries like China and others. This is not between Democrats and Republicans here. This is about the United States of America and our leadership in the world. And I know that the gentleman from Texas has really helped lead the way in terms of space. Doesn't mean to bring this kind of down to a partisan thing. The president's committed. The only difference that I can figure out is that he wants to use American companies through Commercial Crew as one of the important issues here, and that rather than go back to the moon, he wants to go to Mars, right? He wants NASA to return to its mandate of exploring, you know, like really pushing the envelope here. So I think we ought to work together, and we can fully disagree with the administration or anyone else. I think we should keep the politics out of this as best as we possibly can. This is not an area where I understand why we would have politics in it. I want to thank you for your work, and I do want to ask you about the education budget. One of the hits in your proposal is in this education frame, and I'm very concerned about this. You know, one of the reasons for NASA, ever since President Kennedy's speech at Rice University in 1962, was to inspire more engineers and scientists. And so I think we ought to be doing more, not less. You know, I know that you're trying to integrate educational activities throughout the agency, but I'd like you to speak to what these proposals will mean from the education budget.
Congressman, what the reductions mean in the education budget is that in the classic manner, we would reach fewer schools or fewer museums or fewer students if we did business the way we have always done it. What we're trying to do we have an education design team in place that's looking at revamping the way that we conduct our educational programs. Leland Melvin, who is the head of education for me, co-chairs what is called the Federal Committee on Co-STEM, or Cooperation in STEM Education, that's under the auspices of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and there are representatives from every agency of government that has educational programs, and we're trying to find synergies among our programs such that we spend less but we achieve more. We now are demanding metrics, what I call measurable results from what you do. And unfortunately, 2 years ago, I couldn't tell you what was accomplished from my education budget. I could tell you that we reached 10,000 kids, but I can reach 10,000 kids out here on the street, and I have no impact on them whatsoever. Am I giving them something that goes into their brain that makes them want to get into science, technology, engineering, and math fields? And that's what we're trying to do now. I have to tell you, a program that I helped introduce called the Summer of Innovation, I now have questions as to whether that is, the way that I want to continue to do things in the future, now that I've begun to work more with industry, and I find that they like that idea, and they can do the same thing on their dime. And it may be that, I find ways to collaborate with them. So there are untapped ways that we can collaborate with industry as well as other agencies to get more bang for our buck, if you will. So I am not concerned presently that the impact of our education program is being decreased.
Well, thank you, and I am concerned a little bit about it, and we'll explore it with
understandable.
staff a little bit more. But I do want to thank you for your personal commitment. I was over at a school here in D.C., and you had been there the week before me over at Cornerstone, which and it was just it was great that you had been there, and I saw the pictures and interacting with the kids. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We're going to go in a couple other areas. We have a lot of other questions, aeronautics. But before we do, I just ask you, because you're going to reach a certain point that it can't be done, to bring the companies in and see, we're not taking the competition out. We beat the Nazis by coming together. And we are in a war. It's a different type of a war, but it's a struggle for the dominance with regard to America being the dominant power in space. You want that as much as anybody else. But I think it would be helpful to bring them together and give them the opportunity to say no, because some are going to get zero when they could get, all for one and one for all. So you might just do that. Now, in checking around, there will be a point that people have made so many investments and different processes can't be connected, and therefore it's too late. But I would ask you to look about at least giving them an opportunity to express whether or not they could or not. And by doing any savings that we could would also allow us to continue the Mars program and programs like that. But I'd ask you to do that. But the administration says to place a high priority on R&D programs that develop transition technical innovations from federal agencies in the industry. You had mentioned that earlier with regard to Boeing. Your aeronautics program has developed a dozen of new technologies and processes that are in use in aviation manufacturing and airline operations today, and is at work on others that will emerge in the next 5 to 10 years. And yet the aeronautics program is slated for a decrease in the budget request. Why isn't your program being considered a budget priority like other R&D programs with direct ties to manufacturing and job growth? Since you mentioned job growth with regard to the commercial crew.
Congressman, because we now have a space technology program and an Office of Chief Technologist, which we did not have before, we are able to take some of the programs that used to be in the aeronautics portfolio, for example, hypersonics, the entry, descent, and landing that Congressman Schiff mentioned. Entry, descent, and landing up until now was carried as a part of the aeronautics budget, and it's now in the Office of the Chief Technologist because that's more in keeping with technology development to support a planetary mission, a Mars mission, if you will. We are also collaborating with other agencies to find out, because some of our aeronautics research doesn't benefit NASA. It benefits the nation, it benefits the Department of Defense, and so we're trying to say, okay, if this is something that's good for the nation, we need to look at different ways to collaborate on the funding. NASA should not pay the whole bill for this particular capability if it's not for civil space. And we're doing that. In my meetings with senior leaders in DOD and senior leaders in DARPA and other places, we're trying to decide how we better appropriate the funding, responsibility for funding for some of our aeronautics programs, such that we can do more with what we have.
The aerospace industry has consistently run trade surpluses for the United States, with a surplus in 2010 of $60 billion. A big driver of these surpluses has been the export of aviation technology, much of which had its roots in research done by NASA's aeronautics program years ago. By pulling back from the aeronautics program now, do you run the risk of failing to produce the technical innovations that will fuel our exports in the next decade and beyond? And can we sustain America's leadership in aerospace technology with decreasing investments in aeronautics research?
Congressman, what we're trying to do actually is we're not pulling back from aeronautics. I think in many cases what I'm asking them to do is look at programs that we've had on board for many years that may have reached the maximum return on investment, and what are some of the innovative things that we should be doing now. We're involved in, for example, water ice testing to help industry to prevent engine shutdowns, undesired engine shutdowns at altitude in clear air, because they accumulate clear ice on the stators in an engine and cause it to flame out. Those are important things that we do, and we were not doing that before. We have reconfigured a wind tunnel at the Glenn Research Center in order to be able to do that kind of testing. So gradually what I'm asking them to do is look at new things that we can do in the portfolio that bring direct return on investment to American industry. We're trying to do exactly what you say.
The budget request essentially eliminates your hypersonic research program. What's the effect of that? Will DOD pick that up?
That is a question that I am asking, and again, I hate to keep going back to collaboration with Secretary Donnelly and Dr. Dugan over at DARPA, but when the decision was made that we were no longer going to fund mainly air-breathing hypersonic research, because we retain what we call entry, descent, and landing portion of hypersonics. There are a number of different things. Air-breathing hypersonic research is critical for the nation because it's critical for defense. That is not something that the civil space community, at least some people don't believe the civil space community has a need for right now, but we have the expertise. So what we're trying to collaborate with DOD and DARPA and others on is, okay, you pay for it, I'll continue to do the work. So we'll do it as reimbursable work, and that is underway. It's just too early to tell.
Did the country make a mistake by canceling the SST years ago?
Congressman, I don't know. I think we keep trying to go back to supersonic transport. I think we'll get there one of these days.
What's your expert? I mean, you were
I'm not
a pilot at that time.
As a pilot, I'd say, yeah, we made a mistake. But that's a purely pulling it up, I don't know.
Well, I respect your opinion. You certainly
my humble opinion as someone who is totally uninformed of where the SST program was at the time is,
we had aircraft flying. I mean, it used to come into Dulles and used to come into...
It's easy for us to go back and point out mistakes that we made in terminating programs.
I was just wondering, though, so the lesson is, and that's what I was hoping you would tell me what the lesson is. You sometimes miss the opportunities or that was a good decision.
In hindsight, because I'm not informed, but I will tell you, based on what I know now, it probably was a good decision at the time, because NASA is now involved in research to help minimize the effect of sonic booms on community. Anytime you go supersonic, like a supersonic transport had to do, I mean, you disturb communities unless you can find a way to minimize the impact of that sound wave traveling to Earth. We're a lot smarter today than we were back then, so we haven't abandoned it. We're coming back to it, and I think in the future you're going to see a successful supersonic transport program.
When was that? Was that in the late 70s that was abolished?
That sounds. So I'll have to get you the information.
Well, no, that's okay.
But the research we're doing now at the Glenn Research Center, Langley, mainly at Dryden, the flight test, we have actually demonstrated that we can minimize the impact of sonic booms. But that's in its formative stage. We're not there yet. But that's the kind of new research that I'm saying we need to do in our aeronautics portfolio.
The National Research Council, which is part of the National Academy, just released a report saying that NASA has not been sufficiently investing in aeronautics flight research, and that this will inhibit NASA's technology from being readily accepted in the marketplace. How do you respond to that? And should NASA, I mean, this is a leading question, spend more on flight research, even if it means reducing other priorities as the NRC recommends? Do you respect the NRC?
I have high respect for the NRC. I don't agree with...
Who's the chairman of that?
I'm not... I will get that information for you, sir. I don't remember who the chairman of the study was, but in talking with Mr. Jaewon Shin, who heads my aeronautics mission directorate, we don't fully agree with all the findings of the committee. In principle, we do, and where I agree that I just alluded to you is we do need to take a look at our portfolio and abandon programs that have been on our plate for years that continue to give marginal return. Okay.
Well, just
Russ Harris,
did you read
former aeronautics AA?
Did you read the report? It was
that West?
Did you read the report
Yes.
saying that NASA has not been?
I'm sorry, sir?
Did you read the report saying that NASA has not been sufficiently investing in aeronautics flight?
Yes, sir. And that's why I'm saying I disagree in some respects with the findings of the report. I agree that we need to be much more aggressive in looking for new technologies that we can develop that will bring speedier results. The supersonic, and one of them that they gave is supersonic, is mitigation of supersonic of sonic booms. We are working on that. There were a number of things that they called out that NASA should be doing that we are doing. So that's why I say I don't fully agree with the report. They didn't fully appreciate the research that is presently going on in NASA.
Okay. Will NASA be doing a rebuttal to that, or will you be doing?
We, as a general rule, to an NRC report, we if we're asked, we write a comment, and we will respond, because our Aeronautics Mission Directorate has already been meeting with the committee, the people who delivered the report, because we asked for it. So we will have to go back and respond to them and say, okay, thanks very much. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we can't do, and here's what we didn't even think about. So we are going to try to do this.
Have you read China's 5-year plan for space activities issued in December? And if so, what is your assessment of the likelihood that they will achieve the goals laid out in the plan, especially with respect to human spaceflight?
Congressman, I am remiss in, I have not read it because I was, since you told me to stay away from bilateral activities.
Well, you can read books about it. Let me just say, you know how. But seriously, I love
program.
The Chinese people.
Yes, sir. I know.
I meet with, probably meet with more Chinese people than any other member of the House.
Yes, sir.
Any other member. Probably have a deeper and greater relationship with more Chinese than any other member of the House, period. That goes to the members of the International Relations Committee and wherever they are. We had a whole group that came in, that came over here in February. All the dissidents that come, so I mean, I love the Chinese people. They are marvelous people. And so you can read about it, and so we're not saying, you know, in fact, if you want to have the books that I read, I can send them over to you to read, and I can get you to come on in. So that doesn't mean you can't read or talk, so. But I love the Chinese, just so you know, this is nothing against the Chinese people.
Yes, sir.
What my concern is the people who have the Chinese bishops under house arrest, or have the pastors in jail, or have Xiaobo, the Nobel Prize winner, in jail, or have his wife under house arrest, or her spying against this. So the Chinese people are wonderful. It is that little group that,
yes, sir.
So if the Chinese were to success, so you haven't read it, but you should. I'd like to get your comments on it. If the Chinese were to successfully achieve the goals of that plan, but since you haven't read it, so maybe we'll just submit this question for the record.
I will take a look and I will give you an answer. But Congressman, I guess if I can, I will say, I do know vaguely what their objectives are, and they have different objectives than we.
Well, what we'll do
is they focus on the moon, we focus on Mars.
We'll just submit this second, but the question will be, we'll submit is, if the Chinese were to successfully achieve the goals of that plan, how would the quality and quantity of their achievements compare to what NASA expects to do over the same time period, and what were our relative position in terms of space leadership at the end of this 5-year space? So if you look at it...
Yes, sir. I will look at the plan, but I can tell you that I can almost guarantee that after I read it, I'm going to tell you the quality of what they produce will be dwarfed by what we do. They have a long way to go to be as capable as we are, and so, while we should not rest on our laurels, one of the reasons we need to continue to fund technology development is so that we stay way ahead. As we decrease our funding in technology development, we will still be ahead, but the gap will close. I can tell you that without reading the report. And that's the same for any nation. I use the Tiger Woods analogy. Tiger's, his game's still good, but when you look at what other players have done in the gym and other places based on his example, the world's catching up. And that's the same way we are. We're really good. But if we stay out of the gym, if we don't put sufficient funds into technology development, into education, as you have mentioned, into commercial crew, others will catch up with us.
One of the major goals outlined in the Chinese space plan is to increase international cooperation. Of course, as we know, you're limited in the amount of bilateral activity you can engage in with them, but you can and do participate in multilateral activities. Is it your expectation that NASA's level of multilateral engagement with China will increase? If so, in what context and for what purposes?
Congressman, presently, I don't presently see that any of our activity with China will increase in the next year or two, because we just don't have any discussions that are going on. As I told you in my phone call after the heads of agency meeting, we do know that our international partners are actively engaged on a bilateral basis with the Chinese. So, hopefully we will benefit by whatever they do with the Chinese, but we do not have any intention of cooperating or participating.
Well, good. And they will share, our international partner will share with you, as we share what
they have been very candid. We have been the transparency among the international partners is incredible. And none of them have tried to hide the level of their relationship with the Chinese, and I don't expect that they will. They know our situation, and so they tell us as much as they can.
Good. Last month, Defense Intelligence Agency Chief General Ron Burgess, I think the U.S. Army, testified before the Senate and said that, quote, China's ability to track and identify satellites is enhanced by technologies from China's manned and lunar programs, as well as technologies and methods developed to detect and track space debris. Beijing rarely acknowledges direct military applications of its space program and refers to nearly all satellite launches as scientific or civil in nature. He also noted, quote, in recent years, multiple cases of economic espionage and theft of dual use and military technology have uncovered pervasive Chinese collection efforts. Do you agree with General Burgess' assessment about China's efforts to acquire U.S. space technology?
Congressman, I don't have the advantage that he does, but my guess would be yes. Everyone.
Have you been out there for the FBI briefing?
I have not had a briefing recently. I've been trying to get one lately, and we're working on it. Yeah, we are working on it.
Yeah, I would hope we could help and just set that up. I'd ask.
It's not been they are perfectly willing. It's been my schedule that has been the holdup.
It's pretty clammy. You could be there. Yeah, I think.
And I intend to do that. I will say, dual-use technologies and dual-use things in general, everything is a two-edged sword. There is nothing today that we do that doesn't have an up and a down side. Prior collaboration with the Chinese, for example, was in the area of debris mitigation and debris detection. Everybody wants to know how to find stuff out there that has a bad side in terms of what, certain communities in this country, that's not good for people to be able to detect everything out there. And so there are things that I can't do, that I'm asked not to do because they would put our national security at risk. So, is there a risk? Yes, there is. But we do need to know what they're doing, and I think the area where you and I respectfully disagree, and we've discussed this at length, my belief is it's only through collaboration and engagement that I'm able to know better what they're doing. But I rely right now on other agencies helping us understand that. I rely on my international partners helping us to understand where they are technologically, and that's why I can say with confidence that even if their 5-year plan works, they're like all the kids chasing Tiger Woods, but I'm still, we're okay.
Okay. Speaking of engagement, NASA's Inspector General at different types of engagement recently testified that over the past 2 years, NASA had more than 5,000 computer security incidents resulting in the installation of malicious software on or unauthorized access to NASA systems. Do you have a sense of how this compares to experiences in other major agencies?
Congressman, I just had a meeting with my IG yesterday, and I am not privy to the report that is presently ongoing, but I do know it's what he told me, and I will only repeat that, is that my folks say we're woefully deficient compared to other agencies, and that is something that concerns me greatly. And you will see that from the day that the NASA IG was here testifying with my Chief Information Officer, we have put things into place We now have a policy that I'm about to sign out that will require us to encrypt all portable IT devices. That's iPads, laptops, smartphones. You know, do I find it incredible that we weren't doing that? Yes, I do. Whose fault is that? That's mine. I should have known that. You know,
Well, that's why I think it'd be helpful to do the briefing as quickly.
Yes, sir.
You know, China was the result of most of these impacts.
And see, that's Congressman. I take your word. I do know
Well,
that
when you go, when you get
Yes,
the
sir.
briefing, and if you want, I'll go with you again.
That won't
I
be
mean, but it's really
you have more to do with your
No,
time.
but I would be glad to do that because I really think, and Mr. Vitale is going to come next week, but I think when you go out there and see it, it will really be like, wow, I cannot believe
Congressman, I think you'll find, and I'm not sure because I haven't talked to the DIA or anybody else. My guess is the vast majority of the hits that we get are kids. They're hackers who are doing it because they can, and they want to demonstrate that they're better than we are. And they have no malicious intent. They don't think what they're doing is malicious, but it is malicious because as soon as somebody finds a way to break into something, it gets out. So we've got to find ways to protect ourselves against our own people who do not have any malicious intent. Encrypting our devices is one way to do it. We guard against anything getting to the International Space Station or satellites on orbit because that's heavily encrypted as commands are sent. So we're comfortable there.
Well, and this may be more than kids, though. Your IG raised the number of incidents, theft of laptop.
That's right.
Containing NS space station control codes, unauthorized access by hackers to mission-critical JPL systems, and the electronic theft of employee credentials. And so I guess the question is, have you fully mitigated the losses associated with the events discussed in that testimony? And I saw that Mr. Nelson, Senator Nelson, raised
Congressman, we are making every effort we can. We are expediting our efforts to take mitigating actions against the things that have occurred that we don't want to reoccur.
Well, they said that 75%, the IG, 75% of cyber-related recommendations made by his office have been successfully closed. For the remaining recommendations, are they outstanding simply because NASA is still in the process of implementing them, or is it because you just don't agree with them?
Oh, there's nothing I don't agree with. The main reason that they are not fully implemented yet, cost, difficulty of accomplishing it, and a discussion the IG and I had yesterday was he assumed that to encrypt all of the equipment under his responsibility would be very simple. He's the IG, and he has people all over the country, and he should just tell them to do it. However, each of his people is resident at a NASA center that has its own IT system and system of control. And that is another thing. That's a governance issue that may not seem like a big deal, but it's a governance issue that I'm working on right now, and that is to make sure that my chief information officer has oversight of these types of issues across the agency. That has not been the case before. In the millions of dollars that are available for IT and IT security, the chief information officer only has control of a very small portion of that, and that may need to change. And I would correct one thing.
Well,
ISS was never in jeopardy. I tried to emphasize that. Yeah. There were no commands that could be sent that were sent, so ISS has never been in jeopardy. The interference we got with Terra and some other satellites, they have never been, their control has never been in question.
Well, you mentioned it, and we can, rather than going in the deep question, but NASA's CIO lacks authority to impose security policies. Would you want the committee to carry language?
No, sir. I do not.
We urge you to address the problem, but would you want us to direct you? I mean,
no, Congressman, you have directed me.
Oh.
And you know, when it became known to me the deficiencies we had, that's direction enough.
Oh, okay. Well, could I ask, please, if the CIO would also join you then out there at that briefing?
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay. I have a few more. If Mr. Vitale, you want me to go? Or
go right ahead. I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
The Space Shuttle transition and retirement. According to the budget request, fiscal year 2013 will be the last year of shuttle closeout payments. However, the request is predicated on the assumption that NASA will be able to meet a substantial pension liability payment later this year. If the liability is unexpectedly large, some shuttle retirement work may have to be deferred. What is NASA's most current estimate for its pension liability needs? If this estimate turns out to be correct, can you stay on schedule for completing shuttle closeout?
Congressman, we feel confident that we will stay on schedule for shuttle closeout. The funding that's required to take care of the USA pensions is in place, and the final determination, as your information says, is partially dependent on where the market is on the day that the final payments are made. But I think we are okay financially in order to be able to meet that obligation on the part of the government.
Oh, okay.
And hopefully we will not have this discussion after this fiscal year.
Okay. On the space station again, NASA will need to begin negotiations soon to increase the number of Soyuz seats it has purchased to maintain International Space Station access while waiting for a commercial capability. How are you estimating the number of additional seats you need to procure when you don't know for sure when the commercial capability will become available?
Congressman, what we have done is we've made an assumption that we will have private American commercial capability available in 2017, and so we know how many seats we are going to require through 2016. So that's the way we base our request for funding for for payments to Roscosmos. I will add, because it goes back to a question I was asked earlier, we are working within the administration on the language that will come in that will request the appropriate INCSNA extension that will support our requirement for additional Soyuz seats that will take us through 2017.
Well, that was the additional Soyuz purchases for crew rotation and rescue will require an extension of the exception to the Iran, North Korea, and Syria Non-Proliferation Act.
Yes, sir.
Last time that was done in the appropriation bill. Do you have a legislative strategy to seek that waiver without coming to the appropriations? How are you going to do that?
I will take that for action and get back to you, because right now, as far as I know, we are going back because it's the State Department has concerns, the whole administration has concerns about extension of INCSNA, and that's being worked through the interagency process.
Because Russia is aiding the Syrians, as you know.
Yes, sir, I understand.
Syrians are killing their own citizens, and I would jump it around a little bit.
Yes, sir.
I just want to ask, but I want to...
Sorry, and I will say, we will, because Russia is a partner on the International Space Station, we will always be reliant on the Russians for certain aspects of operation of the International Space Station. So,
sure. The cost of maintaining the International Space Station and transporting astronauts to it won't be worthwhile if we don't do a better job of maximizing the research potential. Out of the $3 billion that we spend annually on the International Space Station, only $229 million is for research, and more than half of that is for supporting infrastructure and administrative costs. Are our investments in International Space Station research and the returns on those investments enough to justify the continuing expense of running the station?
Yes, sir. There are a couple of things there. We have what we call there is a governing body called the Mission Control Board that is subordinate to the heads of agency, the five of us who oversee the International Space Station from the 5 member agencies. Bill Gerstenmaier, who heads my Human Exploration Program, chairs the MCB, and they are looking at ways to reduce the ongoing operational cost for stations. Simultaneously, what we're doing in the United States is we have awarded a contract to an organization called CASIS.
That hasn't worked out very well.
It's going through growing pains, but we're confident it's going to work.
Who were some of the other ones that applied?
I will get back to you. I know Battelle was one of the competitors, and I will get back to you on who the others were. But the intent of the concept was to take NASA out of the business of funding all research and putting it in the hands of an independent, non-governmental organization that would go out and recruit people and organizations for research on the International Space Station, and the funds that they earn will come from the investors and not from NASA. So if I look at it, I would not pay, this is just a fictional number, I would not pay CASIS $200 million to just pass through to researchers. I'll pay them a management fee of $25 million a year to take care of running the International Space Station. They will go out, and as they bring business in, so it's a business proposition for them. They go out and recruit, manage, select the participants, and the funds that come into them replace what NASA would give them to fund researchers.
It doesn't seem like they've done very well so far, but NASA.
They just started. And I'm not trying to defend anything.
Yeah, I just heard they lost their top person.
Their executive director did resign,
and just started, and that's kind of like the captain of the ship leaving before that.
But they have a new captain in, and they're going through growing pains, and because we are not telling them what to do. We have provisions in place. They have milestones that they have to meet, and we have sent them, or we are in the process of sending them another letter to remind them of the milestones, to remind them of the plan, and then we'll see how they go.
You are utilizing NASA seems to be utilizing its own International Space Station research space, but the National Lab portion of the space station is underused. If you looked at it from, and this is not a very good analogy, but there were 50 apartments open for lease there that you could be leasing out to the drug companies to find the cure for cancer or for Alzheimer's or autism. And how many of the apartments are leased? I mean, how many have? That's not a very good way to ask you, but I'm just trying to, from my own mind, how much capacity is being used and how much is still available for people to come in?
Congressman, quite a bit of the capacity is being used, but there is room for people to come in, and that's the purpose for bringing in an outside organization to try to find people that we would not find, to try to find organizations that do different types of research than we did.
How many work for them?
For CASAS, for the company? I will get that information for you, sir. I don't know how large they are.
I wonder if you wouldn't have been better. Was that a legislative decision, or was that a decision that you all made?
I will find out for sure, but I think it was collaboration between us and the Congress. We always wanted to have an independent entity, a non-governmental entity, and we may have, and I will take it for the record to find out, whether there was legislation involved in the stand-up of the organization.
Now, you fund them, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So how do you balance their need for an independent board and executive leadership with your ability to ensure that their funds are well managed?
Because we have oversight. They are just like any other contractor, and we have, as I mentioned, they have milestones that they have to meet. They have to present their plan to us.
If you had to give them a grade now, what grade would you give them as of this? I know
it's too early to give. Quite honestly, it's too early to give.
When I went to Patterson Elementary School in Southwest Philadelphia, we got interim grades. If we had to give an interim grade, what would Mrs. Patterson give them? Would a C or an A, or where would their grading be now?
Congressman, I'm not trying to. I would have to consult.
But that's the reason I ask you, and I'm not going to make you give them a grade then, if you don't want to give them a grade. But it's $100 billion that we've spent, and I think we all have an obligation to the American taxpayer.
Yes, sir.
To make sure that it's utilized and that it's used.
And that is our intent. In fact, we are so intent on having it be successful, because what we would then like to do is expand its capability to manage not just the U.S. segment, but perhaps the entire space station. That would be ideal, because that would help all of the partners get their costs down, and that's what everybody's looking for.
Okay. And how many people do you think they're going to be when they get up to full strength? Where will they be?
Congressman, I'll have to get that.
Where are they based?
They're based out of Florida. They're actually headquartered in Cape Canaveral.
Yes, sir. Cape Canaveral. Wallops Island. I understand you visited Wallops Island for the dedication of the new Horizontal Integration Facility last year. Virginia is very excited about using this facility in the upcoming test flight of Orbital Sciences rocket and subsequent launches to the International Space Station. The Virginia Commercial Space Flight Authority is currently conducting an RFI to look at bringing a heavier rocket to Wallops to increase use of the launch site. Two questions. One, can you tell me if and how funding from NASA's 21st Century Launch Complex program is being used at Wallops to support future development, and what other steps is NASA taking to encourage more robust use of Wallops?
Congressman, 21st Century Space Launch does not include specific funds for Wallops. However, we spend funds other ways on the Wallops facility. If you look at and some of our expenditures are not in money; it's in people and talent. If you look at the work that's going on right now for the development of the launch complex for orbital sciences, over the last year plus, we have lent expertise and people power from Langley, Stennis, Kennedy, Marshall to help Mars, which is the developer of the launch facility for the state of Virginia. We have been helping them try to get that facility up and running because we need for orbital to be able to launch.
Okay. On the workforce, NASA has carried several lines in its budget over the last few years whose purpose was to pay for civil servants who were not allocated to a program at the time. This was due to a combination of major programmatic transitions within the agency and restrictions on how you can manage your workforce. Have you finally reached a steady state on civil service labor such as all of your FTEs are allocated to an actual program now?
Congressman, we do not have all civil servants relegated to a specific program, and that is an issue of flexibility that center directors have, for example, that is frequently misunderstood, and it's a stumbling block. If an employee wants to do something innovative, if we hold to, okay, they've got to be assigned to a program that is doing that innovation, and it's something we don't even have yet, that means nobody does innovation. We're trying to follow a model that we see in industry where a center director can allocate a certain amount of funds in his budget, so his or her budget, so that employees can go and spend 10% or 20% of their time, and that would not come from a program. And that is an area that we continue to work right now, and there's quite a bit of study in going on among the leadership of the agency to find out how we pay all of our FTEs, our civil servants. We're trying to determine how we can give flexibility to the centers that they can do innovative things, even though that is not covered by a specific program or project that has a cost code.
NASA has been making use of buyout and early retirement authorities to adjust its workforce and expects to do so again in fiscal 2013. Are you making these adjustments to reduce the size of your workforce or to update the mix of skills within it?
I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat that?
Are you making those? NASA has been making use of buyouts, as other agencies have, and early retirement authorities, as others have, to adjust its workforce. And I expect you're going to do the same in 2013.
Yes, sir.
Are you making these adjustments to reduce the size of your workforce or to update the mix of skills within it?
Congressman, the primary reason is twofold. It's to give us the flexibility to get the right skill mix, to have the right people for programs going forward. You know, shuttle is gone. There are a number of our workers who that's what they did. That's all they knew. So we try to cross-train them to the greatest extent possible. In order to bring in fresh blood, new ideas, we need to be able to hire our interns and co-ops. And so if people are not leaving at a pace that allows us to bring in co-ops and interns at the rate that we want, then we offer them an opportunity to leave sooner than they would think. And that's, I think everyone should understand, some people who were planning to retire are not retiring because of the state of the economy. And so, you know, we're looking at all the innovative ways we can to help our employees, even if it's training for something else. In the case of contractors, for example, who left the shuttle program, it varies by geographic region. People in the Johnson Space Center area, they went right over to the petrochemical industry because they were looking for engineers for the oil industry. Florida, not quite as fortunate. We were really worried that we were going to lose people, civil servants even, at Marshall because of the buildup of the Redstone Arsenal. And we're somewhat relieved that they didn't take all our people. But that it varies from region to region. And if I can correct one thing for the record, because I may have misanswered your question, when you asked about 21st century funds, we are not prohibited from spending money on Wallops or any other facilities. There are provisions in the law for us to use 21st century launch complex funds for other facilities, and sometimes we will do that. But to my knowledge, we don't have specific money designated right now that will go to Wallops because we think that the funds we're putting there for out of other accounts is sufficient for right now. The Human Exploration Operations Mission Directorate.
Just a few more questions on cost control for large missions. While the cost overruns in the James Webb program have been deeply disappointing, I hope that some good lessons were learned from the experience to help avoid a repeat of this situation in the future. Do you have a formal process in place to identify such lessons from the James Webb debacle and apply them to other large missions that are at risk of overruns? And if so, what are the most important lessons learned?
Congressman, we have a number of lessons learned from James Webb. Some of them had to do with management and management oversight. We changed out people in the management chain at Goddard, at headquarters. No one was as disappointed when I found out about James Webb than me. And I have taken on some responsibilities that I did not have before with James Webb. I took it out of the, I took its funding out of the astrophysics division because I could not expect them to take on that big a task. So it became an agency imperative, an agency priority, and that's why we've had some of the discussion we've had here. If I had to depend on the astrophysics division to eat everything, we would have had no astrophysics program. We are looking at reporting frequency. I have my associate administrator, my previous associate administrator, Chris Scalise, was monitoring James Webb every single day, and he and I talked about it every week. He has been replaced by Robert Lightfoot. Chris is now out at Goddard, where he can watch it even more closely because now it's his responsibility as the center director. So we're getting increased oversight over JWST, increased reporting. We have milestones that are laid out, and I get a copy of the milestone report on a routine basis. So that's how I can tell you with surety that we have met every milestone over the last year and a half, cost and schedule. We now utilize something called Joint Confidence Level Analysis, JCL. We applied it to James Webb, but to be quite honest, it was too late.
Too late.
Too late. But still, we applied the principles of JCL to James Webb, and what it did was it gave me assurance that the replan was valid. We utilize what we call their independent review boards. In the past, the independent review board didn't come to the administrator. They went to a center director or they went to a program manager or something, and so now I look at all the independent review boards for all major projects, and if I want, I ask them to come in and brief me. So they know that, if they have a problem and they're having trouble getting the program manager to hear or the center director to hear, then their recourse is to come to the administrator. And I think those are different things, and we learned all that from JWST.
On goals, many members have urged you to set specific destination-based goals for human exploration beyond Earth's orbit. The administration prefers instead to pursue a, quote, capabilities-based approach, in which our exploration goals are determined primarily by what capabilities are available at the time. Why do you believe this is a preferable approach?
Congressman, I think it's a misunderstanding. What you state is a misunderstanding of what we do. We have definitive goals. The President has established the ultimate goal is Mars in the mid-2030s for humans, an asteroid in the 2025 timeframe for humans. What you speak of as capabilities, it's a capabilities-based approach to exploration, which says we will go as fast as our emerging capabilities allow us to. If we get, if we have some incredible breakthrough in in-space propulsion, for example, we may even speed the time the time that we realize the capability of going to Mars with humans. But that's the only capabilities-based thing. It's a capabilities-based approach.
Well, then
but the destinations are well defined.
I guess, and I'm going to see if Mr. Patel has anything, and then I'll maybe come back to one.
I have some.
Some people don't. Let me add this. If you go to the astronaut office, since I used to be there, and you ask them, okay, where should we be going? My guess is, out of the 65 or so astronauts, they'd say moon. Why do they say that? Because they want to fly to some other place in the universe. And they see 2030 as out of reach for some of them, yeah. Whereas if we went to the moon, they might be able to do that. What they don't consider that I do is, I can't do everything. And so we will rely on the moon for research and technology development, and we may, in fact, it is not out of the realm of possibility that somewhere along the road of getting to Mars in the mid-2030s, we put 2 astronauts on the surface of the moon and a rover that we have under development. But they won't stay there. We're not colonizing. We're not doing any of that stuff. These are the flexibilities that I would like to have in developing the capabilities to get us to Mars. Mars is hard, as is an asteroid. If I had known how hard it was, when I became the NASA administrator.
Well, I think it's the need for something that's more inspirational. Go ahead, Mr. Patel.
I think it was President Kennedy when he gave his speech in 1962 said that the reason we do this is because it's hard, right? I mean, that's the whole design of NASA is for this. So I know, and you've done many hard things. We want to thank you for your testimony today. I do have a number of questions we will submit for the record, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah. And just one or two other questions. We'll have a lot also for the record, too. I saw the study, a little brief article about the health impact with regard to the brain, with regard to astronauts out of. Would you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. It's the impact that we have recently discovered, and we have consulted with our Russian partners because they have a lot more experience.
Who is the person who's been out longer? Probably a Russian.
Nope.
No. How many days would that
I want to
be?
say, let me go. I will find out for you. But we have a couple of astronauts who are the longest serving person in space today is my old crew member Sergei Konstantinovich Krikalev, without a doubt. Sergei has spent about 2 years in space.
How's he doing today?
He's doing well, but I haven't talked to Sergei to ask him what his latest MRI showed about his optic nerve or whether he suffers from increased intraocular pressure. When Sergei and I flew together in 1994, we didn't even know what increased intraocular pressure is. And this is a recent discovery. We have had some of our researchers who have known about it, but in the case of medical science researchers, they don't like to talk about things until they have enough ends.
Are we asking the Russians if we
Yes, we are.
work with them?
And the Russians initially said, no, we don't know what you're talking about. Haven't seen it, but in hindsight, they went back and said, we have seen that.
And are we having our doctors examine?
We collaborate. We collaborate with them. And what we're talking about is increased pressure behind the eye that has done. If you want to talk about things that it has done, it causes some flattening in the area of the retina that impacts vision, decreases vision in some, not all. We are noticing that it's increased pressure on the optic nerve. We're concerned there because it could result in blindness if it got to the point that it was extreme. We don't see that yet. When talking to my chief medical officer, Dr. Rich Williams, he is not to the point yet where he thinks this has a long-term impact on long-duration human exploration. Yeah, one of the things that people need to understand, these are microgravity phenomena. One of the reasons we might go to the surface of the moon quicker than we thought is to put people there for an extended period of time, 30 days or something, to see if we see the same thing that we're seeing in the space station. Station is 0G. The lunar surface is a sixth of Earth's gravity. Mars has gravity, so these problems may not even materialize themselves in an astronaut that's resident on another planet or on a moon or something.
And now you're talking about a subject that I'm quite impressed with, the work of NASA related to this. And we had some briefings earlier this week, in fact, on the neuroscience work and studies that NASA has been doing. And one of the things, Mr. Chairman, they noticed is not only this issue around the optics, but also in terms of in the human brain, these Alzheimer's-like effects that happen for astronauts while they're in space and disappear when they return. And NASA has been doing a lot of work in this regard. And along with some of the international partners, I understand there's been some surgical research done in terms of neuroscience surgery-related tests that have been done on the space station. This is an area that they've done a tremendous amount of work over a number of years, and is very, very important. So I want to commend you. Yeah. Now, we've had personal conversations about this, and the chairman and I collaborated around getting OSTP to launch a working group bringing together agencies that are doing work in brain research. But I'm quite impressed with the work that NASA is doing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this up.
Congressman, I appreciate that. If I may just make one statement, because we've talked a lot about value. I can't put a dollar value on the research on the International Space Station. The fact that we now know much more than we ever knew about osteoporosis, which affects women and men, by the way. The fact that we now have discovered this problem with increased intraocular pressure. I don't have a way to put a dollar value on that. So if you ask me, is $100 billion of investment in the International Space Station worth it? You bet. If I could put a dollar value on the medical returns here on Earth, I tell people, I go home every day. I feel great because I've made life better for somebody on this Earth. And I apologize for being so passionate about this, but I would hate to see the nation become short-sighted with reference to the money that we spend on space exploration. You cannot place a value on the benefits that come from the International Space Station. I forgot to bring it. We have a book that's called Benefits from the International Space Station, and it's only biomedical benefits from the last few years. You can't put a price tag on anything that's in that book. But I would bet, if you could, we're talking about trillions of dollars. So I am concerned in these tight fiscal times that the nation lose its way, and those of us, you on this committee and others, who have to make hard decisions, decide that we're going to not invest in human exploration because we'll do it later. As Congressman Schiff, some of the things we do, you can't walk away from. He's absolutely right. You cannot walk away from entry, descent, and landing expertise on Mars, and we are not doing that. And that's the message I'm trying to bring. I know better than anybody. We can't walk away from those, and I don't intend to do that.
Well, I don't think anybody up here wants you to. In fact, I think we're probably pushing more than, and that's why the little bit concerned this group CASAS hasn't produced maybe as much. So
yes, sir. I understand.
Maybe a CASAS done a better job last month. Something would have taken place that would have been discovered next week that would save. So, they had to get with it, or if they're not with it in 30 or 45 days, we had to pull them and give it to the National Science Foundation or the National Academy or somebody else. But to have the opportunities with the investment. So I don't think Mr. Fatah and I would say we shouldn't do it.
Oh, Congressman, I assure you, if they don't meet milestones, then we will find another way.
They ought to go. With that, I think we'll just, thank you for your testimony. We have a number of other questions. We will just submit. If you can let us know, I'm not checking up on you, but I'll be glad to go out when you get the briefing, take your CIO.
I will do that.
I'd ask you to bring the companies in and see with regard to the commercial. I think we're going to have a problem here. And Mr. Fatah and I, we work close. I mean, we didn't have any problems working with the numbers we had. But now it's getting harder and harder, and we would like to be able to continue and not to, and you do, not to retreat. And so with that, the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you very much.